As a quick reminder to everybody watching before things actually get going there in the courtroom, just pay attention to that clock in the upper right-hand corner. If you've been watching us all week long, you're probably tired of me saying it, but again, for anybody new or maybe had forgotten, just pay attention to that clock in the upper right-hand corner. That is the actual time of when things are transpiring.
April 3rd, 2025, you kind of said, hey, I need to talk to you, you're a listed witness, so what are you going to testify to, correct?
He asked me a few questions, yes.
And one of those questions was, does GRPD have any policy or training that directly addressed being disarmed of one's taser or being confronted with a taser? And you said no.
Yes, it did.
Okay. And once again, this thing that you signed that was provided by the defense, you talk about close quarter deployment of the taser, you talk about drive stun of the taser. There's nothing in the statement that you put about being disarmed of a taser is considered deadly force, correct?
Correct.
I guess, did you know what this was for?
I did.
What was your understanding this was for?
The areas that I would be asked to testify about.
So that skipped your mind with it, or you didn't say, hey, I was going to testify about how being disarmed of a taser is deadly force. You just left it out?
I wasn't asked, it wasn't provided, and that.
You didn't read it?
I read it, yes, I signed it, I read it.
Well, you knew at that, because this was last Monday. We're starting jury selection. You finally filed something last Monday.
Objection, Your Honor. This was in response to his expert.
I'm sorry, what's the legal basis?
This is not relevant. This affidavit was attached to our motion to exclude his expert for certain reasons.
This is the only report we got from him, so I think what it's a statement.
Well, I mean,
This is a summary of his testimony, and it was in rebuttal to the prosecution's expert.
So you're saying it's not relevant?
Not relevant to this. This is not, we provided Mr. Becker with a summary of what his testimony would be at trial as required under the court rules. He's not required to provide an expert report, and the investigator had a chance to talk with Mr. Seibert.
Okay, so I'm not sure how it's not relevant. So
It's taken out of context. This is not saying this is what
I
it
will
is.
definitely allow you to flesh all of that out and redirect. But I don't believe that it's not relevant, so you can
It's just-
certainly flesh it out more, but if he authored an affidavit, and also his response could also clarify that, so. And I don't know what the whole question was gonna be.
Well, and there's nothing in that statement. You wrote, it was provided to us on Monday. The day we started jury selection, we get this. That's the first time we had anything in writing from you. You don't say anything about.
That is not true.
And you're testifying, so.
I have a right to lead the witness, Your Honor.
Right, but you
But
can't,
it's
you're making a statement of fact, and so. It's not
Okay.
really-
You've never written anything down about this, have you?
About this incident?
Yes.
Yes, I completed a police incident report
Where is it?
in our system. I'm assuming you have it with the trooper's investigative report.
It was never provided to us. Do you know why? We did
I-
a search warrant.
That's not my purview or responsibility, sir.
Well, in terms of you didn't do an expert report.
I did a police incident report,
But you
yes.
didn't do an expert report.
No,
And you, at no point in time in your incident report, did you ever talk about tasers, deadly force if it's taken away from you?
no,
So at least, and then you didn't tell the officer, or excuse me, the trooper, when he showed up at your Grand Rapids Police Department to talk to you about it. You never told him about that.
no.
Just skipped your mind?
It didn't seem, I didn't talk about it.
He asked you specifically, do you have any policies about the sound of a taser? You said no.
We don't have a specific policy about it, no.
but that would be a big thing. We don't have a specific policy or training. He said policy or training, and your response was no. How does that not seem to be a legitimate response?
It didn't seem to be.
Okay. Tasers are different. You didn't say specifically a taser yesterday. You said a disarmable weapon.
Correct.
Okay. Is an OC spray a weapon?
Potentially, yes.
So if a person's disarmed of OC spray, if a person disarms an officer of OC spray, that's deadly force.
No,
Well, isn't a taser and OC spray the same thing under Grand Rapids policy?
it is not.
I'd like to go to Exhibit 32, Your Honor. Can you put it up on the board, please? Excuse me, 30. This is Exhibit 30. So you have a policy. You have a separate policy for firearms, correct?
We do.
It's its kind of own entity. So you have a firearm, that's kind of the highest. You agree with me, firearms are deadly force, right?
Yes.
No question.
Yes.
So then you have intermediate control weapons. That would be the next step down, if you will.
Yes.
And then you have compliance control devices, correct?
We do.
That's kind of a three-tiered thing. Is that a fair assessment?
I would consider OC spray lesser than that tier, but yes.
OC spray lesser than what tier?
Then a taser or compliance, less lethal tactical weapons, specialty munitions.
Okay, well, clearly, okay, let's go impact weapon use. So we got impact weapon, right?
You said exhibit 32, but it says exhibit 30.
I said, I correct myself, I thought.
Oh, okay.
Exhibit 30, Your Honor.
And this is page.
This is the first page. This would be under 9.1, excuse me, 9.3.1.
Thank you.
So impact weapon use. The purpose of an impact weapon is to provide officers an effective control option when confronted by potentially violent subjects. So impact weapons provide control of subjects by creating temporary motor dysfunction in impacted muscle groups. So an impact weapon would be your ASP.
Yes.
Could be a flashlight. I think that causes a flashlight, something you can hit somebody with.
Correct.
So that's an impact weapon, and you use it in situations where it's kind of a confronted by potentially violent subject. It's a little bit more higher level, if you will, because they're potentially violent. Is that a fair statement?
Yes.
Gonna go to 9.34, then you have aerosol restraints. That would be pepper spray, right?
Correct.
The definition of ASR is to provide members, being the police, safe and effective control option. Temporary control of subjects will provide a degree of safety for both the officer and the subject. That's under Section E, correct?
Yes.
Right underneath that is electronic control devices, your taser.
Yes.
It's the exact same definitions as a OC spray, isn't it?
Yes.
So in your mind, you think it's different, but under Grand Rapids policy, OC spray and tasers are the exact same thing under definition.
In a definition, not in the use of force policy or under a force understanding.
Under what force understanding? This is your policy that
That's
gives
a-
the same definitions.
This is a definition policy that gives an example, not our use of force policy.
Okay. So where in the use of force policy is it differentiated, I guess?
And the levels of force options that are available to officers
So you're talking about the active aggression, active
in that area, yes.
in that area. So in the policy, so let's go look at that then. Policies here. Okay, is this what you're talking about now, or is it 32 now, Your Honor?
That is a old use force policy, sir. That's, the bottom right date says 2017 on it.
Yep.
What Officer Schurr would have been expected to adhere to is 2021's policy revision.
But this is the one that was provided to us under, these are the training records provided to us. Exhibit 32 is the training records provided by GRPD for Officer Schurr. So you're saying we weren't provided the full records?
That's a training record, sir, not a policy. The updated policy should have been available to you. I don't have that.
So
And that's not my purview.
You're the policy, you're the training person, you're the training.
Right, but that's not my responsibility for record release. I mean,
So there's some other policy out there that says, that'll say, taser can be used in deadly force, that will be able, the defense can put up on the thing.
I'm sorry, what?
There'll be another policy that the defense can put up there then, that says tasers are considered deadly force, like Grand Rapids Police policy.
No, sir. I was just pointing out that's a 2017 policy. 2021 is the latest that Officer Schurr would have been expected to adhere to.
Now we'll stay right here. We're going to talk about this 9-1.5. You brought this up in your testimony yesterday.
Yes.
This is one of the considerations, the totality of the circumstances that Grand Rapids Police consider.
Yes. Some of them, yes.
Some of them. Well, when you're looking at it, and when you're looking at the totality of the circumstances, your opinion was it was okay for the defendant to chase after Patrick that day.
Yes.
Because this is, use of force. When you talk about totality of use of force, it's all uses of force. It's not just deadly force. It's force at the beginning, force at the end, force in between, right?
Correct.
And it's got to be objectively reasonable for the entire time, right?
For the use of force duration, yes.
Okay. So that use of force, in terms of considering that it was a good idea to chase, let's look at right off the bat, the moment to chase. Patrick's bigger than him, right?
Yes.
There's two people. There's one in the car and Patrick.
Correct.
Relative strength, we already know it, but this is before the chase is taken off. Patrick's stronger than him because, as you throw in your testimony, he lifted him off the ground.
He did.
So he's bigger, stronger, there's more than one purpose, and may have an access to the weapon, right?
Correct.
So on the first four things, the first top four things, if you will, so he's bigger, stronger, there's more than one purpose, and may have an access to the weapon, right?
Correct.
So on the first four things, the first top four things, if you will, all of them count against the defendant chasing after Patrick, correct?
His factors, yes.
They're factors. So what are the good factors, I guess, in there that would allow for a chase?
It's also a compressed time constraint, his decision-making of deciding to pursue and then actually trying to physically restrain or arrest. Those are all happening in split-second decisions, not long drawn out.
Sure.
Working through them.
Sure, but a reasonable officer at the time, you train officers to take all these things. I mean, you just don't have that up there for no reason. You don't have a policy for no reason, right?
Correct.
They're trained to take these into consideration.
They are.
And so part of the training would be say, hey, somebody's bigger, stronger, you got more people, it may not be the best idea to go after somebody in those situations, right?
Potentially.
I'm going to say, like, we can't put this on the board because we're still trying to keep off the actual training stuff for the media. The jury will get this. Stay with Exhibit 32. This would be use of force policy changes from 2020. You recognize that?
I do.
And one of the policy changes was, well, maybe not a policy change, because it was a warning before shooting. That's one of the things that's listed there, correct?
Yeah, under number 3, it says require a warning before shooting. Then our MOP, which is our manual procedures, whenever reasonably possible, officers should provide verbal directives before deadly force is used.
And verbal directives before deadly force is used. You kind of said yesterday, well, that covers anything, like stop, or it Doesn't have to be stop or I'll shoot. Stop is sufficient under your view.
We don't define exactly what a directive is, no, but stop could be considered, I would say can be construed as a directive, yes.
What's number 4 there?
Require that all alternatives be exhausted before shooting.
Okay.
Already, and then underneath it says, already in Manual Procedures 9-1 under escalation and de-escalation of force.
So it says it's a kind of a change, but that's, according to that, you already have that. You're supposed to exhaust all alternatives before shooting, correct?
It says that as a use of force policy change recommend, yes.
So under policy, you're supposed to try and exhaust all alternatives, right?
Correct.
Okay. Now, I get it. Yesterday you said if somebody walks up, pulls a gun out, you don't have to try and do anything else. You got to respond with deadly force if you're met with immediate deadly force, right?
Yes.
But Grand Rapids Police teaches a number of different things in terms of use of force continuum, don't they?
I would say in use of force, we don't necessarily have a continuum, but yes.
But in terms of use of force, pressure points, right?
Correct.
We're going to go through them. We have the mandibular angle. Okay, that would be the kind of right between the neck here. This is a pressure point, if you will.
Yes.
So you train on these, on both sides, pressure points. You can get somebody like right here, correct?
Potentially, yes.
You jam it in, and that's a pain compliance guy. Is that a pain? Please tell us.
It's semantics the way you're describing it, but yes, it's more of a, you have to control the head, or so that way the person doesn't move away from your pressure. But yes, it's
There's
a
that.
pressure in and towards the top of their head, yes.
You have the hypoglossal.
Correct.
This is bad, I get.
Hypoglossal.
The hypoglossal is kind of grabbing them underneath the chin, like right underneath here, the jawline. Is that a fair?
Yes.
Okay, so you can grab them, manipulate them that way. That's a pressure point that you teach.
Yes.
You have infraorbital. I'm not going to do this to you, but that's kind of getting somebody from, you get them up under the nose and yank back on the nose.
Correct.
You have a jugular knot. Oh, excuse me. You have the combination of the hypoglossal and infraorbital, right?
Yes.
You have the two. You have a under the nose and under the chin to yank somebody backwards, right?
Correct.
You have the jugular notch. That's right here. Is this correct right here?
Yes, in that region.
Is
Correct.
it, you got like a little, when you feel your bone comes together, you got a hole right there. That's taut.
Yes.
You have the brachial plexus. There's a muscle, your shoulder muscles. That's a pressure point right along the neck. In this area, you can jam down on it, grab it.
Yeah, and it kind of feeds up to the side of your neck. Yes.
So that's a pressure point that could, once again, is that a pain compliance or does that?
It can cause both, like a motor dysfunction or pain compliance.
Okay, but that's something you teach.
Yes.
The clavicle notch. Okay, that would be right in here. Is that like between as a collarbone? Right
Mostly, yeah, roughly where your collarbone meets. By
So
your
there's
shoulder.
like a hole between where it's kind of there's a almost like a hole. You can press down on that, right? You can press down here. Is that fair?
Yes.
All right. So those are all pressure points that are taught.
Correct.
On top of that, then you have the takedown strikes and stuns, right?
Yes.
You have a brachial stun. It's like, okay, the brachial here, it's like a karate chop to the neck.
Can't chop. It's
Okay.
got to be a flat surface.
I'm sorry?
Can't. If a chop or a punch would be considered a deadly force option because of the risk of injury. It's a flat surface striking the side of your neck.
So like that, more
Correct.
that?
Or back of your hand or inside of your forearm, something like that.
Okay, actually, a chop, people can collapse, get knocked out kind of from that, right?
It's potentially, yes.
Do you teach that all? I mean, in desperate situations, that like a chop is okay, or is it always flat?
I mean, potentially it could be an option if that's what, but we don't specifically train people to strike in the side of the neck as a deadly force option, no.
So we have a forearm strike. That's, I think we saw them on the training video. I don't know if you're in here, the forearm strike where you're punching with your forearms, right?
Right.
So that, I think, in this instance, did you see, I don't know, did the defendant do that in this instance? I was more open hands. Did he do any forearms?
Didn't appear so, no.
You have your palm heel strike. That's a punch with the heel, right? That?
Yes, the meaty part of your palm.
Then you have a straight punch, which is just your normal punch, straight punch, right?
Correct.
You have a combo, the palm heel strike and straight punch.
Yes.
So you do like a punch, heel, punch, you kind of alternate. Is that the ideal?
Different arms, like using your body momentum, yes.
There's an angle kick. What's an angle kick?
Striking one of the outside of the leg, there's nerve points there with your bony part of your shin, more or less like a kick across somebody.
What's a shin kick? Would be a kick specifically right to the shins, right?
Yeah, it's more of a, if you think about stubbing your shin on something, that pain kind of down by your top of your shoe or boot. Yes.
And there's a knee strike. So we definitely saw him do a knee strike.
Correct.
So we did one of those things.
He did.
All right. What's a straight arm bar takedown?
It's a takedown option that we teach and train, where you extend somebody's arm down, and the officer would be in this area, and you use body momentum and mechanics to bring them down.
How about iron wrist takedown?
That would be if a handcuff is applied or partially applied. You use the body mechanics of your wrist bent and the mechanical advantage of the handcuff to pull somebody down.
So definitely that one wouldn't apply because it wasn't handcuffed. That's only used in handcuffs.
That's the iron part of it. Yes.
Okay. What's a 4-finger wrist lock?
That would be more or less just bending the wrist and kind of an arm weave to bring somebody down.
How about a rear sentry takedown? Because this is a big one. Because a rear sentry takedown under your training, what I've seen, is designed for even if somebody's bigger from you, you can kind of pull them down from behind. Is that a?
Yeah, if somebody the size difference, obviously you'd have to break down their height disadvantage because it's again body mechanic dependent.
The final one's jaw control. Is this you kind of grab somebody with the face and push them back?
It's more of a cheek hold, and you have to again counterbalance just like all of the pressure points, because the pressure, if you're not counterbalancing it, they're going to be able to escape that.
Okay. Now, do you have your ASP on you?
I do.
Can you bring it out and show it to the jury?
I can. I carried mine behind my firearm, and it's an expandable baton.
Okay. Can you expand it, please?
I can. So it would expand to, I don't know, 20 inches or so, 21 inches.
So this would be the impact. That would be an impact weapon that we talked about earlier.
Correct.
Okay. It's not just, okay, they got this, swing away, right? You teach them on specific things on how to use that, right?
Yes.
One of those things is open mode to common perineal. What exactly is that?
So as the officer opens that baton or expands it, striking the peroneal nerve runs on the outside of your thigh, kind of if you think of the seam of your pants, for gentlemen anyway. That's the area, kind of above your knee, below your hip.
What's a femoral strike with the axe?
The femoral nerve runs on the inside of your thigh, obviously large artery too, so that would be the target area.
You have a radial medial strike?
Nerves on the top of your forearm and the bottom of your forearm.
So you're trained specifically to strike with your asp on the top or bottom of the arm.
Correct.
And then we talked about it. OC spray is part of it.
Yes.
And there's a reason why the OC spray may be effective, but that's another option.
Yes.
We talked about a little bit when those are kind of your traditional normal ones. Flashlight is kind of a trained thing. If things are going really bad, you let your officers use a flashlight to strike.
It could be used as an impact weapon as opposed to a baton, yes.
Now, you talk all these training records, I kind of put them in front of you. These are all taught basically at the academy, right? Or not the academy, through your training program.
Correct.
When they're recruits. And so these training records, use of force, you're recertified each year, right?
Yes.
So these training records we have, the defendant was recertified every year on all these pressure points, ass strikes, whatever, any training that we just went over. He was recertified every year on that.
Correct.
And in fact, he was recertified on February 22nd, maybe a month and a half before this incident.
Yeah, I believe so.
One of the things you also talked about was action versus reaction. That's something you train.
Correct.
So action versus reaction, I want to be clear on this. So hypothetically, you're an expert, so hypothetically, you're responding to a domestic violence call. That's something common for Dartmouth police, right?
Yes.
So you respond to a domestic violence call. They say, it went out the back. You go out the back. I'm standing there with the gun. You can't shoot, you can't.
You're standing there with a
Just
gun?
standing there, right like this, gun at my side.
There's a lot of the factors to it, but it would depend.
Well, what other factors?
Depends on kind of how you're moving, distance of us.
Just said I'm standing. I'm standing here right there. I'm standing, gun pointed, I'm looking at you.
No, I wouldn't shoot in that situation.
Why not?
Because you're pointing at the ground.
Okay? Not posing a threat to you right now, am I?
No, you're a threat.
I'm a threat, but I haven't done anything well, if I'm a threat, why can't you shoot me then?
Because I would have you at high ready, my gun pointed at you, giving you loud verbal commands.
Okay? Wonder if I'm running away.
I would be giving you loud verbal commands. So if you have a firearm in your hand, you're running from me, I would still have my gun up and giving you verbal commands that I give chase.
But action beats reaction. I can quick shoot,
Yes.
right? That's what you train.
Yes,
But even in this circumstance, this wasn't a gun, this was a taser, right?
it was.
Taser doesn't do the same thing as a gun. You would agree with me on that, wouldn't you?
Does not function like a firearm, no.
So the one big concern of the tasers is going to disable somebody to have somebody access their gun. That's one of the biggest concerns, right?
Yes.
Part of this, did you know that you knew the defendant before all this happened, correct?
Correct. He worked for me when I was on midnight as a watch commander.
So he was one of your staff, if you will.
Yes,
And were you part of his training as well?
I have been over the years, yes.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Yes. Could you switch the computer to the defense, please? Morning, Captain
Morning.
Cyber. All right, I have a few questions for you. You were asked by Mr. Becker about your status as an expert for the defense, right?
Yes.
And were you ever asked by Mr. Becker to provide information about this case?
Only when Detective Sergeant Tubergen asked to meet with me, whatever, last week or 2 weeks ago.
And when he asked to meet with you a few weeks ago, did you meet with him?
I did voluntarily meet with him, yes.
And are you aware of anyone at the Grand Rapids Police Department that was asked for their opinion by Mr. Becker about this case?
I am not.
Are you aware that the prosecutor has had GRPD's policies and training since this incident occurred in 2022?
Yes.
Are you aware if anyone at GRPD was asked
Okay,
about the
Jack,
training
this
and
is
policies?
Just because it's redirect, it's not a cross-exam.
I'm clarifying the information that Mr. Becker has put out there.
And you can clarify without asking leading questions, so,
The-
because you are being also stating as to that. You can just rephrase.
Has Mr. Becker ever asked you about GRPD training or policies prior to a
Before-
few weeks ago?
Before yesterday, no.
And how much are you getting paid to be an expert for the defense?
I am not.
Were you ever asked to provide a written report like the paid experts in this case prepared?
I have not.
And you met with Detective Tubergen. Did you meet with Detective Tubergen before this case?
No, the day of the incident, I don't believe Detective Tubergen was present for the round count. I believe it was one of his colleagues.
Sorry, did you meet with Detective Tubergen before the trial?
No. I'm sorry, the 23rd, I think the date, we sat down in my office for an interview, or whatever that date was, recently.
And when you talked to him, did you discuss the nature of your testimony with him?
No.
When you met with Detective Tubergen on April 3rd or whatever it was, did you discuss some of the GRPD policies and training with him?
Just the specific questions he asked in regard to if we had a foot pursuit policy, and then the taser-related, I forget the verbiage in the report there, but about the taser disarming or whatever.
And you provided answers to all of the questions he asked you, right?
I did.
And you were asked some questions about GRPD's policies and trainings about foot pursuits.
I was.
And you helped identify some of the mandatory trainings that GRPD has about foot pursuits, right?
Correct.
And they included the different training scenarios that you train Grand Rapids police officers about foot pursuits,
Yes.
okay? And those are all within the records provided by provided to the prosecution, right?
I would assume. I'm not the records management area of the department, but I would assume so, yes.
Your Honor, do I have permission to approach?
Yes, and with,
This is what has been marked as Defendant's Exhibit II. Captain Seibert, do you recognize this document?
I do, yes.
And is this a summary of the GRPD policies and training?
Yes, it is. It's a policies and mandatory training summary chart.
And there are quite a few mandatory trainings that have been provided at this point, right?
Yes, it chronologically starts from when Officer Schurr was hired in 2015, and then chronologically through 2022.
And this, and I guess if we need to bring all of it up, but is it fair to say that this is Exhibit F? This includes some of the pages from that mandatory training, but there are binders worth of training that
Yes.
officers received, right?
Yes.
And Your Honor, the defense would move to admit Defendant's Exhibit II at this time.
Is this something that's part of GRPD policies?
This is a summary of policies.
That's what I'm meaning. The summary is not in the GRPD policies, right?
I'm not sure I understand your question, sir.
This is, like, when you go into your policy manual, where this is not a document created by GRPD, is it?
This is not a document created by GRPD, no.
Who created this document?
I don't know.
You don't know who created this document, so how do you know what it is or where it came from?
I just said I don't know where it came from. I understand the verbiage and the exact quotations that are taken from several of these mandatory training files.
So, but this is not something that's part of the actual policy, and you don't know where it came from, so I don't believe it's admissible. There's not a sufficient foundation.
Your Honor, if you'd like, I will go through the mandatory trainings then. Mr.
sorry, but, so.
I mean, we-
Withdrawing your move to admit, or are you going to have something else you'd like to state?
We'll withdraw the summary chart,
Okay.
and at this time, we'll,
Refer to the training, like you held up a book, was that Exhibit F?
yeah, that was Exhibit E and F, but
But then.
I was referencing Exhibit F, yes, which is already,
1 through 18?
Yes.
So that's already been admitted.
yes. And I guess, Bob, if you can actually, before you publish it on the screen, can you please pull up the People's Exhibit 31 and go to page 15? Or just go straight to 15? And Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
I'm handing Captain Stiver with what's been previously marked and admitted as the People's Exhibit 31. And Bob, can you go to,
Can we approach real quick?
And you are currently watching day 4 of our coverage of the Christopher Schurr trial here in the Kent County Courthouse. This is a look inside right now. Again, just as a reminder to everybody, we are on a 30-minute delay. They are taking a brief break right now as both the prosecution and defense have approached the bench to talk to Judge Christina Mims. You are not missing anything at this time, but once things start getting going again, we'll be sure to bring up our microphones when we are allowed to listen back in.
Sensitive nature of what will be displayed on the screen, I'm instructing media to not shoot the screen. And the witness is okay, testimony is okay, but showing what's on the screen would need to be, will not happen. So, okay. And go ahead, Ms. Hamilton, your question about you have page 15, and you handed him page 15, right?
I believe it was, actually, it might be page 14. Unless you, what is your example one? Is it 1901? What's your example one?
Sorry, 129.
All right, sorry, Bob. I don't know exactly what page this is in the People's Exhibit, but this is the same as Defendant's Exhibit F5. Can you pull that one up, please? And then it'll be on the first page of that.
F5,
Yes, which has already been admitted.
and is that what you handed the witness?
It's the yeah, it's the same. I just don't know in the People's Exhibit which page it is.
Okay.
And I just use the relevant pages in ours. Okay. And directing your attention to the scenario 1, discussing the foot pursuit. And as part of your, can you explain what this type of scenario is and what it includes?
Yes, so oftentimes in our mandatory training cycles, we have specific objectives or training goals. So, for example, this is 1901, meaning it was 2019, it was the first training cycle of the year. So CEW, ECD, Taser, we're trying to accomplish a specific objective with scenario 1. So many times we build out scenarios that are very scripted, so we could try to limit for safety reasons and to get the response we want, I guess, in short. So this scenario 1 was we set up that the officer is responding to a foot pursuit that another officer called out, and when they arrive, they find the role player, which is acting as the assailant or the suspect, is on top of the officer. So to get a close probe deployment, meaning firing the taser from a close distance with a follow-up, touching the taser to a different point in that body to achieve the electrical circuit or NMI.
And that involved an officer who was also in a solo foot pursuit?
Correct.
And you trained Grand Rapids police officers, including Officer Schurr, on solo foot pursuits, is that correct?
Correct.
Bob, can you please pull up Exhibit F17? Your Honor, do I have permission to approach?
Yes. Just say what you're approaching with.
I am approaching with Defendant's Exhibit F16, which has already been admitted into evidence.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm now handing Captain Cyber a copy of their unknown risk traffic stop training. And you were asked some questions about unknown risk traffic stops. And Mr. Becker had questioned you about an officer's ability to leave the vehicle. Can you talk about some of the factors that you train officers to look for, which are reflected on page 2 of the PowerPoint? There.
Yes, sorry. So as the jury can see, just working through things to think about, things to be aware of. What's the nature of the offense? As in, why are you stopping the vehicle? We have what we refer to the only two variations: unknown risk and high risk traffic stops. High risk would be a known violent crime has been committed. It's a vehicle that matches the description. There's specific intent, or specific information that leads you down that path, and you have time and resources and all that. Unknown risk is what this incident would be classified as. So understanding why you stop the vehicle, environmental hazards, meaning, where do you stop the vehicle as geographically or location, any intelligence that's available, type of vehicle. Obviously, like large vans and certain things like that are more dangerous because you can't see inside of them, or if windows are completely tinted and those kind of factors.
And is that all sorry?
Yes, that was it, sir.
Okay. And is this all based on, is this part of the officer's discretion to determine?
Yes.
And is it usually, do you usually train officers to look for these threat assessments and analyze the person that's directly potentially posing a threat?
Correct. Kind of a concept we talk about is handling one problem at a time, meaning an individual that's out of the car is your first priority. Right? You've got to address that right away. And then work to occupants in the vehicle if be. We specifically train our people to do a quick assessment if they're running by a car, where they'll glance or look and obvious signs of danger. But yes, they have to process all that information.
And in this case, who is the person that was presenting the most risk to Officer Schurr at the time of the stop?
At the time of the stop, the driver was.
Why?
Because he was already out of the vehicle. He had separated from the vehicle. Officer Schurr is still trying to get his radio traffic out, put the vehicle in park, undo his seatbelt if he had it on, and get out of the vehicle.
Bob, could you please go to page 14? Oh, and the middle slide. Let's go. And one of the things that we talked about a little bit yesterday is how you train officers to assess people's risks, or the risk that someone poses. Is that
Yes.
correct? And what are one of those concepts that you train them?
I think we said it yesterday, but if it didn't, historically most foot pursuits end with a tackle or they give up. It doesn't usually lead down a long, drawn-out, extended struggle or fight with the suspect. So the concept you see on the slide, failure to comply, ask yourself why. What am I missing? What do I not know? Why is this person fighting so hard to not be put in handcuffs or be arrested? So you, again, the action versus reaction, I don't know why. I can't be in their mind. I don't know what they did. I don't know. I obviously know I had an arrest, or specifically if I have an arrest, and why they're fleeing and why they're fighting me so hard.
Bob, can we pull up Defendant's Exhibit E1, please? And this is the GRPD use of force policy that we spoke about yesterday and that you were asking questions about.
Yes.
And you, Mr. Becker was asking you some questions about OC spray. And Bob, can you go to 9-1.3? So page 3. And then 2B. And what is OC spray considered?
Under our policy, it's under 2, subparagraph B, compliance controls, which lists out soft empty hand techniques, meaning joint locks, wrist locks, pressure points, and then compliance control devices, meaning handcuffs. ASR stands for aerial, it's OC spray. Yeah.
And that's, OC spray is similar to pressure points?
Correct. It's one of our lower levels of force options available.
And Bob, if you could go to the next page, which is 9-1.4, D. What is a taser considered?
That would be an intermediate level of force, along with impact weapon, the baton, those type of things.
And is that a higher level of force than OC spray?
Yes.
And once a person tries to disarm an officer of his taser, and they have been fighting over it for over 2.5 minutes, and once the officer makes a decision or is in fear of serious bodily injury, is he entitled to use deadly force?
If the situation is there, yes.
And once the officer makes the decision to use deadly force, is he required to go back down and try every lower level of force?
No,
Why not?
because it's not reasonable. We keep saying that term, reasonable. It's not reasonable to expect if I've exhausted other options of force in my escalation and they've been unsuccessful, how could we possibly expect them to go back down that ladder and try again? They've demonstrated that it's been ineffective for a myriad of reasons, but it's been ineffective. Why should they have to go back to lower levels of force?
Are you aware of the Kent County Prosecutor's Office ever charging a defendant with resisting and obstructing after a foot chase?
I am, yes.
And did the office take the position that the defendant should be let go because the officer created a dangerous situation?
No.
Are you aware of the Kent County Prosecutor's Office deeming that running away...
I'm gonna have to object. This is what the relevance is on every other case that we've charged. We charge thousands of these, and so I don't see what the relevance is on what our decisions are in some unknown cases.
Your Honor, that's a position that this office has taken, that
Which office?
the Kent County Prosecutor's Office has taken previously. They've charged people for resisting and obstructing for foot pursuits, and the officers have engaged in foot pursuits to catch the person.
The other cases. So I'll sustain based on relevance, and it's outside the scope of cross as well, so.
He was asking about the foot pursuit policy and whether it's permitted or if there is one.
But you're asking about a different policy of a different office.
Well, I'm asking if it's a crime to run away from the police and if,
Is that what you're asking?
I mean, no, but I'm asking if it's a
Yeah, so I'm sustaining the objection on the basis of what other cases, because we're not here about those cases. They're not relevant here.
okay. One moment, Your Honor. All right, no further questions.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
And I do see a couple of hands raised on the room, so I'll have my clerk coming back those questions for me. are the training simulations from start to finish in real time?
In like the average training scenario, I'm
I
assuming?
guess the context is that we saw the graduation video, for example, that showed a clip.
Yeah, so for...
But how long is the actual training simulation?
Yes, Your Honor. So the example, that graduation video that had Officer Schurr's a snippet of his time, those OC, where we expose them and have them do drills, that's probably roughly a minute and a half to 2 minutes by the time they work through. There'll be usually multiple dummies or stations or areas they have to complete exercises at. So, for example, that one's probably 2 minutes.
And the next is how often are those simulations required during training?
So the exposure happens while they're new hires, right? Sometimes when you, historically, if you go to become an instructor in that area, you get exposed or sprayed again, or multiple times, or if you recertify in that. But for the average officer that isn't an instructor, that just participates in our training cycle, they don't get exposed to Taser and pepper spray, but they do reality-based scenarios multiple times through the year on a yearly basis.
And next is, in your opinion, since we're in Grand Rapids, are the GRPD GRPD policies and procedures meant to supersede the generally accepted police policies and procedures?
So that term, I know you've heard it a lot. It can be construed some ways. So our policies and procedures, our training calendars, those the training calendar isn't published publicly, but our policies are publicly published. We are CALIA certified. CALIA is an international organization that accredits agencies. So they do a full review from top to bottom: training, policies, equipment. And I have to submit yearly reports based upon reviews. So they're a 5-year cycle that you're certified for the accreditation. We've been accredited since 2017, which puts us in the top 5% of all agencies in the United States, at least, for that. And we've also had 2017, I believe it was, the 21st Century Policing. They came in, they did multiple work group meetings with community members, and all that, department members, all that, and reviewed our policies. I think Mr. Becker brought up the exhibit had something from that 21st Century Policing recommendations. So we've had multiple reviews by accredited, national agencies or international accreditation agencies.
Okay, so sounds like you're saying they're not meant to supersede, but...
Correct, and I think, my point with that is those accreditation agencies wouldn't accredit you if your policies were out of norm. So, and again, policies that may, for example, say the Los Angeles Police Department may have a policy, may have a foot pursuit policy. What happens in Los Angeles doesn't equate to Grand Rapids, or doesn't make sense. So we pay attention to regional things much closer than on the national stage, because use of force laws are different in the state of Florida or South Carolina. Practices are different, right? Weather dependent, all these factors. So we have a ton of outside reviews. We've been accredited and reviewed and appraised by these organizations for our willingness to do that and open the doors, more or less.
Ms. Hampton, do you have any follow-up from those responses?
Just a few, Madam. So just to clarify, I think what you're saying here is that GRPD, even though some of those things are factors that are sometimes considered, GRPD policies supersede the national generally accepted police practices as far as what your officers...
She actually is leading him. That is not what he said.
I'm going to sustain that because it's not what his response is. And if you can just rephrase your question.
Can you clarify what governs how you evaluate GRPD's police officers' use of force? Whose
by
policies and
our policies.
procedures?
And I would offer our policies do coincide with generally accepted police practices.
And when you say that term, can you define what you mean by that? I mean, that's a very broad term, so what do you mean by that?
Yes, I would point back to the reviews we have by the CALIA, for example, the international organization. They would not offer accreditation to agencies that policies were outside of the norm or generally accepted police practices.
Right. I guess what standards are you evaluating GRPD's officers by? When you're conducting like a use of force evaluation, what do you look at within
One
GRPD?
policy, the training, is it consistent with training? Obviously, state and federal law, which our policies are derived from.
And it's GRPD's policies that are governing what the officer, or how you're evaluating a GRPD officer's conduct, right?
Yes.
One moment, Your Honor. No further questions, Your Honor.
I just want to follow up on the other question in terms of the length of your training. And you talked about the training with the exposure to the OC spray that we saw in the recruit. I guess generally, how long are your dynamic training situations when you do those after they become officers?
Sure. Just an average scenario could be anywhere from 30 seconds to several minutes. It depends on what the intent of the scenario is. But it's also, I want to clarify, it's difficult to recreate physically exhausting scenarios for the risk of injury to the officer and role players.
Yep, thank you.
And I think you touched on this a little yesterday. When you're doing the scenario-based training, like the videos you talked about, when the officers are actually fighting with another person, how long are those scenarios?
Those we specifically designed for, depending on the officer's physical ability or fitness level, 30 seconds to a minute and a half, depending on, because the risk of injury skyrockets when people are exhausted and that. So usually we can accomplish what we need to demonstrate that, usually within 30 seconds to a minute and a half.
Yes.
Mr. Becker, any other questions? I do see one hand on the jury, so I'll ask my clerk to let me get that question. You can clarify, in your opinion, is deadly force appropriate in situations of active resistance or only in situations of active aggression? You can describe GRPD's policy.
Yes.
Training.
Active resistance, you can't say always, but would most likely not lead to a deadly force incident. Becomes, that it's a fine line between resistance and aggression. So, for example, grabbing at a taser would be an aggressive act, and that would raise the level of force greatly. So, hopefully that answers that.
Okay, so is there a policy or training with respect to the appropriateness of deadly force in active resistance or active aggression?
Yes, in our reality-based scenarios, we'll create that position so there's different force options and they understand the difference of active resistance versus active aggression. And that's the whole purpose of why we train the way we do, so they have a conditioned response to those.
Thank you. Any follow-up to that?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Jeffrey?
No further questions, Your Honor.
And I don't see any other hands raised. May this witness be excused?
You may, Your Honor. Oh, I'm sorry. Please remind me.
Yes, Your Honor.
And you're okay with that?
Yes.
Thank you very much, Captain.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And defense may call your next witness.
We would call Chad McCurson.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And before you take your seat, if you could please raise your right hand. My clerk will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you.
Whenever you're ready, Mr. Miller.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Sir, can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Chad McCursie. My last name is spelled Mckeersie.
And sir, how are you employed?
I am a police captain with the Grand Rapids Police Department.
All right, so Captain McCursie, correct?
Captain McCursie, correct.
All right, and how long have you been employed with the Grand Rapids Police Department?
I have been employed as a police officer since January of 2000, so over 25 years now.
And could you just give me a brief synopsis of your experiences and positions over the years, please?
Certainly. I first started as an intern at the Grand Rapids Police Department in mid-90s. And then I got my college education, returned, and was hired as a patrol officer in January of 2000. I worked the road patrol for about 3 years, mainly in the South Service area. I then joined what we call the SRT, the Special Response Team, or the SWAT team. As a police officer, I did that for approximately 6 years. I left the SWAT team, went back to the road. I was chosen to become a community police officer. Joined the community policing team for about a year, and then I was promoted to sergeant. After I was a sergeant, I went back to night shift patrol as a night shift sergeant on the road. Did that for just a few months before I returned back into the SRT as a sergeant and team leader in the SWAT team. Did that for approximately 2.5, 3 years. In that time, I left and went into the detective unit. I became a detective sergeant, overseeing our general case team for about a year, and then moved into our family services team as a sergeant and ran that. Family services handles domestic violence, sex crimes, things of those nature. After that, I did a couple years there. I was promoted to lieutenant, and what we then joined, went back to the road as the watch commander. Our watch commanders or lieutenants run our road patrol shifts for the night and for the day during that. Was there for about a year and a half, then moved into our internal affairs unit. Was the commander of our internal affairs for 16, 17 months for the department, and then an opening became available in the training unit. At that time, the training unit was commanded by a lieutenant. I was at that rank. I took that position and ran our training unit for about 2.5 years. From there, I was then promoted to captain, and I moved to the West Service area as the captain of that team for year and a half again, and then another opening came in support services. I moved into support services. Support services captain handles a lot of the admin work, a lot of the IT, buying the equipment, getting the fleet, the cars, and a lot of paperwork just to get all the stuff that supports our officers out on the street with the equipment that they need. From there, I then, last September, moved to be the commander of our North Service area in Grand Rapids. It was an honor to be the North Service area captain because that's where I grew up. I'm from Grand Rapids, so it's a privilege to be the commander of the patrol teams over the North Service area, and that's where I currently sit.
Need a drink of water?
Thank you.
So appreciate that, and that's sounds like you've had quite a few duties over the years. Now, have you also had, and you may have mentioned this in there, I apologize, I looked down at my notes a couple of times, but have you had duties as a master taser instructor?
I have several other additional duties throughout those years, what we call an additional duty. I was a taser instructor, firearms instructor, defensive tactics instructor, and then I became a master taser instructor when I was in the training unit.
And just to touch on historically, you've been with GRPD since what year?
January 2000.
All right, and has the taser been within Grand Rapids Police Department for quite a few years?
Yeah, it was introduced while I was on the SWAT team as an officer, so probably 2005-06. I don't know exact dates, but it's been a tool for our officers for almost 20 years, maybe.
Now, as a master taser instructor, how many master and taser instructors does the department have at one time?
Typically one. At times we have two. We try to get someone certified as a master taser instructor and then have someone go the next year. So we have an overlap because the master taser certification only lasts 2 years. So we want to have a master taser instructor in-house so that certification doesn't lapse at that time.
How do you obtain this classification as master taser instructor? What were the requirements to earn that role?
To become a master taser instructor, you have to attend the training through Axon. Axon's the company that designs and created the taser. So you go to a 40-week, 5-day class, wherever it's held. Mine was held in Los Angeles. You go to that facility, go through the training for its classroom test, a lot of practical exercises, designing stuff. They also teach you how to become a better instructor while you're there, when you're doing it.
And upon conclusion of that course and earning the role as master taser instructor, what do you do then when you go back to your department with that training?
With that classification inside the Grand Rapids Police Department, I train taser instructors for the department. And then those taser instructors instruct the officers in the classroom environment how to properly use the weapon on their belt.
Now, sir, did you mention you've also been, is it commander of the Internal Affairs Division for a year or two?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a significant amount of familiarity with GRPD training and overall use of force policies and practices that were in place on or prior to April 4 of 2022?
I do.
And do you have a significant amount of familiarity with GRPD taser instruction and practices on and prior to April 4, 2022?
I do.
At this time, I would move to have Captain McCursey recognized as an expert in a couple of things: GRPD training, policies, practices with regards to the taser device, and training, policies, and practices of GRPD related to use of force.
No objection.
All right, so he shall be considered an expert in those fields.
And when I say use of force, in just the general overall policies of GRPD related.
Yes, sir.
To the general duties as far as automobile stops and the basic performance and policies involving those matters.
Yes, sir.
So, but he's an expert in training policies and practices regarding taser.
Use of force, and then also just general overall police duties, police functions within the Grand Rapids Police Department. I apologize for making that.
Duties and functions.
Correct.
Any objection to that additional area of expertise?
No, Your Honor.
Alright, so then he shall be considered an expert in those 3 areas.
Sir, I'd like to ask you some questions related in particular to the taser. We had another witness who testified about several topics. I'm going to try not to go into a lot of the same things all over again, okay? But just to get into a few areas in particular related to taser, and then ultimately get to some specific questions about the case here. Now, sir, the defense is calling you in this case to testify, is that right?
That is correct.
And has the defense talked to you several times over the last 3 years?
Yes.
And has the defense asked you a significant amount of questions about GRPD policies, trainings, and just the general practices of GRPD?
Yes, sir.
Now, did you also testify on matters related to this case about 2.5 years ago?
Yeah, I testified in the original preliminary examination for this case.
Okay, and were you under oath at that preliminary examination?
I was.
Now, have you ever prepared a report, a final conclusion report or anything for either party?
I have not.
Were you ever asked to?
No.
You testified 2.5 years ago, and was the prosecutor present for that?
Yes.
And has the prosecutor or detective on this case ever reached out to you and asked you for more explanation on any training policies or just general overall practices of GRPD?
No.
If they would have, would you have been happy to talk to them?
Yes.
Your office is about a block away from their office, is that fair to say?
That is correct.
Now, going to the Taser, what model of Taser did GRPD use on April 4, 2022?
At that time, we were using the model Taser 7, the T7.
And where would an officer on duty on that day, where would they carry that device?
We mandate they carry it on the opposite side as their firearm, so you have to do a cross draw to pull that, access that weapon off of their belt at that time. The main reason for that is we don't want ever under stress to think you're pulling your taser and you actually pull your firearm. Your firearm's on your dominant side if you're right-handed or left-handed, and so we mandate it's on the opposite side, so you have to make a distinct motion to go get that device to use it at that time.
Now, besides the Taser on that belt, what else is an officer wearing when they go out on a shift for GRPD for the most part?
On their utility belt, if you will, what they wear is, obviously you have your handgun that's in a holster. You have 2 extra mags of ammunition on your belt. You have OC or pepper spray on your belt. There's an ASP baton, 1 or if not 2 sets of handcuffs on your belt, your radio, as well as your Taser device.
And then how about, and you may have mentioned this, vest, do you wear a vest?
Yeah, every officer on the road is mandated to wear their bulletproof vest underneath their uniform. In today's world, you see a lot of exterior vests. This is the uniform that Officer Schurr was wearing was like this. So that is how we're equipped.
When you add up all of that equipment, approximately what weight, if you know off the top of your head?
It's roughly around 20 pounds, 25 pounds. Obviously, my vest and belt might be bigger than skinnier people, but so.
All right. Now, we talked about going back to the Taser 7. The manufacturer, Axon, they make other models as well. Is that fair to say?
That is.
And, sir, did you have the opportunity to sit through the testimony of prosecution's expert, Mr. Bloomfield?
Half of it.
Okay. And did you sit through the testimony of the prosecution's expert witness, the law professor?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Did you hear some of their opinions related to this case?
I have.
Did you have an opportunity to read their report?
I have.
Sir, does it appear that they may have been referring to an older Taser model than the Taser 7 in some of their opinions?
Yeah, it was testified to as well as in the report of, in one portion they considered the optimal distance of 7 feet standoff. It was documented in the report between 7 and 15 feet, that is the rule that was in place for older model tasers, not the Taser 7.
And we'll get into some, but were there some differences, the Taser 7 that Officer Schurr was carrying compared to the older models?
Yes.
Okay. So going forward in the testimony, Officer Schurr had a Taser 7. If I refer to Taser, can we just agree we're talking about the Taser 7 unless I say something different?
Understood.
Now, under the GRPD use of force policies, what level of force would the Taser 7, would the Taser be within?
It is considered an intermediate weapon, so that's where it falls in our use of force.
And how about OC or pepper spray? Where is that located?
That is a lower level of force. The OC, that is used for verbal noncompliance, active, passive resistance, lower levels of resistance that officers would observe.
Does GRPD, do they consider the Taser a less lethal form of force?
Yes, we do.
Now, is that consideration in the hands of a trained police officer?
That is correct.
In the hands of an untrained officer, would GRPD classify it as a less lethal form of force?
An untrained police officer, they wouldn't be allowed to carry it.
Well, let's just go into that, because I think Detective Tubergen touched on this a little bit in his testimony, but an unlicensed person, as far as what are you required to have in order for any old citizen to carry a Taser?
In the state of Michigan, if you were to obtain a Taser, you need the licensing, like a concealed permit, as well as the training and certification form for that device.
And is that whether the battery's in it, no probes, no anything within the device? Are you still required to have that licensing to even touch the device by law?
Yeah.
And what's the classification of an offense if the person does not have that licensing?
That would be a felony in the state of Michigan.
Now I'm going to ask you, I'd like to get into some of the Taser training, but just backing up a little bit, okay, because I can't recall how much this was discussed, but just to give the jury a little bit of context as far as training goes. When an officer is hired into Grand Rapids Police Department, what's their initial endeavor, or what do they first get involved with?
Right. We either send people to the academy to get their state certification, or they put themselves through the state certification. So then they are considered a certifiable police officer.
I don't mean to cut you off there, but what's their state certification?
State certification is a 15 to 17 week course, or sometimes in some colleges it's spread out over 2 years, but it is the certification through MCOLS, the Michigan Commission of Law Enforcement Standards.
And what is MCOLS just in general? Does MCOLS also have standards that every police department is required to follow or abide by?
Yes, MCOLS sets the standards, the basic standards of what a police officer needs to be certified in to hold the status of a police officer.
And is GRPD certified or accredited, or do they follow MCOLS standards?
Yes.
What do you say what MCOLS stands for?
Michigan Commission on Law Enforcement Standards.
I'm going to ask you to say the whole thing every time. No more MCLs.
I apologize.
No, I'm just joking. Let's stick with MCLs. Now, once the cut you off, after the person goes to an MCLs certified academy, and then what?
When we hire that individual, we put them through either a 6-week or an 8-week orientation. Sometimes we shorten it if it's a small class. If it's a bigger class, it's typically an 8-week class. Inside there, we now train them how the Grand Rapids Police Department does our policies, procedures, manual of conduct, and our use of force. We certify them in the Taser. Obviously, we certify them with our firearms. We certify them with every tool that they have in their belt, certify them with their pepper spray. We go over how to do traffic stops. We go over how to do contact and cover. We go over, how to police a burglary report, how to police a CSC, how to police domestic violence. And then after that 8 weeks, we swear them in as an officer for the Grand Rapids Police Department. After the swearing in ceremony, they go into our field training program. It's a 16-week program at minimum that they go into, and it's divided up into 4 steps. Each step, the trainee is always partnered with a field training officer. And on each step, their level of work that they're supposed to do gets bigger. It starts off at like 25%, then it's 55%, then it's almost 100%. And then like the last 4 weeks is they're like shadowed by their FTO to see if they can do the job appropriately. And during that time, that's documented, their mistakes, their successes, and what training was needed to improve skill sets here and there to make sure that they are good and on a solid basis to move on and go on to solo patrol.
Okay. Now, just going back to Taser training, where is the officer initially trained on Taser usage?
During our 8-week orientation.
Okay. And then how about after they're done with the 8 week? Is there continued
We
training?
have annual recertification of the Taser device every year built into our training programs.
And is that just only the department that requires that, or does the manufacturer? I can't recall.
I believe it's the manufacturer's policy to recertify every device or every officer with that device.
Now, when you instruct the officer going all the way back to the 8 week in-house, does the manufacturer provide the department with materials that the department then uses to train the officer?
Yes, we are mandated by the manufacturer to use the most up-to-date version or PowerPoint that they provide to us to go over the slides and educate the individual on how the device works, basic understanding of electricity. I believe you heard from Brian Childs from Axon explain some of that stuff. We go over all that in detail, and then we go through the practical exercises, practice just pulling it out of the holster, arming it, aiming it, how it works, the laser, the light, the nomenclature of the device. And then we put them through real-life scenarios, simulated real-life scenarios, with role players. Role players wear protective suits, and they have certain training cartridges that we can use that are safe to do so you're not getting tased during them. It would just be for like target location on an individual in certain environments, when to use a taser, when not to use a taser, those things.
Now, are the officers then tested to assure their understanding of the taser?
Yes, there is a written test as a part of their initial certification.
Now, are we heard from Mr. Childs already, but just to confirm, are the on the topic of warnings that's given by the manufacturer, are those warnings forwarded on to the actual officer who's going to use the device?
Yeah, they are presented with the same warnings that are in the PowerPoint, and they're gone over in that training.
And just in general, what are officers taught about the Taser device and its capabilities?
They are taught, and it's clearly stated in the PowerPoint, that the Taser device is a serious weapon and should be treated as such at all times.
At all times?
At all times.
And are there any warnings as far as the capability of the device to cause injury or death?
Yes, there are a few throughout the PowerPoint that claim that this device can cause serious injury or death.
Try not to go over everything that Mr. Childs already explained, but just in general, this Taser 7 device, how many cartridges could that hold?
It was equipped with 2 cartridges.
And can you give us just one more snapshot of deploying a cartridge and what that does?
Yeah, the device is equipped with 2 cartridges at that time. And there is a close quarters cartridge and a standoff cartridges. We went with one of each. So the close quarter cartridge is in bay 1 and the standoff cartridge is in bay 2. Bay 1 means if you pull the trigger, that's the first probes that are going to go out. Close quarters has a 12-degree spread. So if I use my fingers, the top one is straight like Mr. Childs says, the bottom one's at a 12-degree angle down. Is designed for that close range deployment to get that optimal 12-inch spread for potential neuromuscular incapacitation at that time. The second cartridge is called a standoff cartridge that has a 3.5-degree spread. So obviously the spread is minimized. So you can do it from a further distance of that individual and still try to obtain that 12-inch spread if the probes hit that individual.
And if I could just approach the witness, Your Honor, with People's Exhibit number 23. Sometimes it's a little easier to have the device in your hand.
No problem. Thank you.
But, we've already admitted that. Does that appear to be a Taser 7
Yes, it does.
without the battery in it or any probes?
There is no battery. There are 2 cartridges in here, but no probes in it.
Okay. So that actually has the cartridges on there.
Yeah, if you
Okay.
push this top button, they come out,
All right.
and you can see the difference. One clearly states 12 on it, the other one's 3.5. They also have it designed by color, so you know which one you're putting in the proper location.
Now, does Axon warn, and then you in turn warn the officers that you should avoid using the Taser on certain parts of the body?
Yes.
And are the trainees taught that if you administer the device on sensitive areas of the body, that in and of itself could cause serious injury or perhaps even death?
Correct.
Can you just list I'm not going to ask you in depth since Mr. Childs went through quite a bit, but just in general, what are those areas that officers are trained to avoid?
Yeah, obviously, and you saw in the pictures of the green little dummy or whatever, the yellow area of the head, the neck, and the chest, the heart to dart thing. So the preferred areas are the green, so the extremities, the large muscle groups of your legs, your entire back. But we want you to avoid the head because of the eyes. You know, we're sending a probe that has a straightened out fish hook. We're avoiding the neck area of the individuals, as well as trying to avoid directly over top of the heart, but as well as the genitals. I don't want to forget that.
All right. And even after both cartridges are deployed, okay, and the probes are out there, the 5 seconds passes, does that device have the ability to re-energize the probes and even the wires?
Yeah, if both probes are deployed into the field, the arena, or whatever you want to call it, you could re-pull the trigger and activate all 4 probes as well as the wires, or you could hit the arc switch on either side, it's ambidextrous, which has been pointed out.
And sir, I was going to go through the voluntary. Our officers provided the opportunity to have a voluntary tasing, or recruits actually, back during the 8-week.
Yes, they are.
And we already had a witness testify and go through some of the video on that, so I don't want to necessarily go through it all over again, but is that required, or that the trainee take that on?
It is not required, it's encouraged. We want them to understand the capabilities of this device and feel what neuromuscular incapacitation is. We also want them experience that when you are experiencing NMI, if I can use the shorter version,
please,
that you can still hear commands from the person that is tasing you. So they know when the ride is over that they understand what the officer wants them to do at that time.
And is the setting for this voluntary, is it a fairly controlled setting?
It's a very controlled setting. It's a very sterile environment. Everyone is required to wear eye protection. We offset everybody, behind where the probes are going down range, so there isn't an errant probe that accidentally strikes somebody. We have spotters there, so a lot of the risks of a taser is the uncontrolled fall that could create a lot of injury as well. And so there's spotters, or we'll start them on their knees or even laying down to avoid that fall risk. You can still accomplish the same goal and experience NMI during that time from a laying down position as well as standing.
We went through the video yesterday, and have you had the opportunity to review the voluntary tasing of Christopher Schurr here back in his academy? And if you recall, and I can pull it back up, but approximately how far was the device from Officer Schurr when the probes were deployed?
In the video that was displayed, Officer Schurr was laying down. The instructor that tased Officer Schurr was probably 1 foot or 2 foot. It's not super clear, I think the spotter's in the way, but you can tell the proximity was very close, and I believe it was to the lower portion, to his legs.
Even at that closer distance, does it appear as though Officer Schurr still felt the effects of the device?
Yeah, you definitely can tell by his reaction, the immense pain that he's experiencing, and in my opinion, it was a lower extremity, lower hemisphere. You heard that term from Mr. Childs, exposure. So you can see him kind of crawling still because it didn't get that full above and below lockup, but he definitely couldn't use that leg, or if it was in both legs at that time.
It appears though he did not have the ability to really control his whole body during that experience.
Correct.
And what model was that back in 2015?
2015, we were using the X2. It is the 2 generations below the Taser 7.
Did the X2 have something different than this Taser 7, particularly with its ability in those close range situations?
Yeah, the X2 was equipped with different cartridges. They were designed at a 7-degree spread, and that's was designed, again, trying to get that optimal 12 inches, and that's why they continue evolving their product. But at that time, the X2 had a 7-inch spread, not the 12-degree like the close quarters or the 3.5 standoff.
So if we had the video with Officer Schurr, similar distance with the Taser 7 device, with the first cartridge that's deployed, what might be expected as far as where it may?
If you did the voluntary exposure with the Taser 7 with the close quarters at that distance, they would get a bigger spread, more likelihood of experiencing full NMI lockup at that time.
So going back to the academy, was Officer Schurr trained going all the way back to the academy, I call it the academy,
right,
that 8-week, that it's acceptable to use the device within closer distance? Would that be fair to say?
That is fair to say, yes.
And it appears that even at a closer distance, even with the older device, it still had a pretty significant effect on Officer Schurr. Is that fair to say?
That's very fair to say.
Now, when the probes connected with Officer Schurr, I think Mr. Childs mentioned this, do you all sometimes refer to that as taking the ride?
Yes, we do.
And how long does the ride last?
It is designed to last 5 seconds.
What happens if the person continues to hold or they repeat the ride after 5 seconds?
It depends on the configuration of the device, the software, the computer of the device. If in older models, if you just held the trigger down, it would keep going for as long as you went until you actually let go of the trigger. In the Taser 7, they have that automatic shut-off that will stop the device after 5 seconds. But it can be re-energized at any time. Any other trigger pull would send a second cartridge, or if you hit the arc switch, you re-energize the one set of probes that are downrange.
Does Axon warn against repeated or continuous deployments or
Yes.
ignitions. And I apologize if I'm using the wrong terminology on this, but now are officers therefore trained not to have continuous or necessarily repeated applications, to have some limit on that?
Yes, officers are trained, if you're not getting the desired behavior change, try a different tactic. You don't want to keep using one thing over. It's more dangerous with the taser because you're putting that much energy into an individual. And I'm not a medical person, but from my training, is repeated exposure to extreme amount of pain. The body's either, adrenaline's going to go really, really high or dump, and that could be dangerous at that time.
Sorry, I'm just trying not to ask you some of the same topics, but just moving on. And I believe this was covered with Mr. Childs, but both cartridges already deployed, and then subsequently an individual has contact, even just contact with the probes or perhaps even the wires, the trigger is pulled. Or why don't you explain? Can those probes and wires be re-energized?
Yeah, the probes and the wires can be energized once they're outside of the device and either in a person on the ground or wherever they're at. So anytime you reactivate this device by, again, pulling the trigger or pushing the button intentionally or unintentionally, it's going to cycle again for another 5 seconds. So that energy is out there.
Now, even if both cartridges are deployed, I know we've talked about this, but does the device still have a drive stun capability?
Yes, it does.
And are GRPD officers trained on how to administer that?
Yes, they are.
And are the materials from axons, as far as warnings about drive stun, are those forwarded on to the trainee or the
Yes,
officer?
they are discussed.
And is it warned to officers that drive stun alone to sensitive areas can cause serious injury or death?
Yes, it's in the material, and we go over it.
Now, sir, were you able to listen to the testimony of the prosecution's expert, the law professor?
Yes, I was.
Mr. Stoughton? And he characterized, did you hear him characterize a drive stun to a thumb?
I did hear that.
Do you have kids?
I do?
You let their kids play with their thumbs in their hands, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Would you let your kids, untrained in particular, play with a drive stun?
First off, it would be illegal for me to do that. But no, I would not. Absolutely not.
You mentioned continuous pain and how the person may dump. Now, what if somebody, as far as the drive stun function, somebody who's depleted, exhausted, a continuous drive stun, could that have some type of effect on them in this dump?
Yes, it could be. If a person is exhausted, that a level of pain would be dangerous.
Have you been drive stun before?
I have.
And is there anything that you characterize the pain to, or other folks that have had
it's
it before?
commonly perceived as a blowtorch. It is extreme amount of pain. It's localized pain, but it is unbelievably painful. So if you were to press a blowtorch against your skin, you'd want to get away from it as fast as you could.
A Grand Rapids Police Department officer, and we'll stick with the drive stun function. When is a Grand Rapids police officer trained to use the drive stun? How?
The drive stun capabilities are primarily used for a third point of contact, to close the circuit of, if you deploy 2 probes and one misses, you can touch them with the device activated in another spot on their body to close the loop, close the circuit, so the energy goes through the top probe, through the person, and then to the end of the device, and then that could create the neuromuscular incapacitation.
I'm gonna stop here and take a break for about 15 minutes. So, jurors, so we'll come back at 10:35. Meanwhile, jurors, please get your notes and tie down in your chairs. And remember to not discuss the case with each other or anyone else. Also, avoid access to news reports about this case in the media or in social media. We'll see you back in 15. Thank you. You may be seated. And I wanted to state for the record that I did notice one of the jurors raise their hand and ask, kind of like, wanted a break. So it was about the time I was going to break anyhow. So I just wanted to make that clear for the record. Because I did kind of motion like, yes, we'll take a break. So with that, we will be in recess until 10:35.
Judge, before we begin, did you want to put that one question on the record that you didn't ask?
Yes, I'll do that at this time. So the one juror had a question of the witness before this witness of Captain Cyber. The question was, would GRPD policies be the governing policy to deem an individual a reasonable officer in this incident and how it played out? I did not ask the question because I did not believe it appropriate for that particular witness to answer that question. In addition, I will instruct the jury on what policy/law they are to use to deem the defendant reasonable or not. So I will instruct them. I didn't believe it was appropriate for the witness to answer the question, and I also didn't believe him to be in a position to be able to anyway. So I don't know if there's any additional information you'd like to place on the record in that regard.
Nothing beyond.
And Ms. Hamilton, because Ms. Hamilton was on that.
Oh, that's
but-
fine.
But go ahead.
We have nothing.
Whoever. Okay. All right, so we'll see you back at 10:35.
back in session. We'll be sure to turn up our mic. Stay here on Wood TV Plus.
So we're going to go back on the record and make sure all parties are present. Are we all set for the jurors, Mr. Dodge
Yes, Your Honor.
and Mr. Becker?
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so we're going to come back in. You may be seated. Mr. Dodge, you may be seated.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. McFarland, could you please pull up Exhibit K? Make it J, please. I believe. That's it. Thank you. Well, sir, I think where we left off, you were talking about the training to a Grand Rapids Police Department officer on using this drive stun function. And just to synopsize, and correct me if I'm wrong, and that GRPD trains to use the drive stun along with the probes to create greater spread. So a third point of contact, you sometimes refer to it. Is that right?
That is correct.
And let's just say, you say third, but if there's even one probe even on an individual and then the drive stun, that's not 3 points, right?
That is correct. It's designed because sometimes a probe, depending on the clothing, or I mean, it still could be in contact with that individual. Maybe it's in their wallet or in the belt or in a large puffy coat, so it's not close enough to the skin. But one probe is actually in the skin, so that's the differentiation of, a third point of contact to close the circuit.
Now, if we could just play this video here, Mr. McFarland. Does that appear to be a training video? I know you sat through some of the trial. It's Officer Schurr.
Yes, that is a training video designed scenario to do a third point of contact.
And the music and all, it's part of like a training montage for the officers and their families.
At the end of the orientation, we take snippet videos like you've seen in there and provide it to the officer and their family for their swearing-in program. It's a big day to get sworn in and become a Grand Rapids police officer or police officer anywhere. So it's a montage of videos just to kind of remember the training they went through.
I heard you pick the music for those. Is that right?
I do not.
Okay. Now, if we can just play it again, I just want to, when Officer Schurr initially goes to pull the device out of his holster, can you just back? All right. If we could just watch this moment here, please. All right, that's good. So, you explained that the taser's on the opposite side of his dominant hand. Is that right?
That is correct.
And did you see him attempting to get the device out of the holster?
I did.
And is there some type of action it takes to get the device out?
Yeah, the holster that's designed for the taser is a retention holster, is to keep it secured on our person, so we don't get it taken away from us. But it takes some practice because there's retention methods on it. This one, I believe, has a two-step. It has a thumb snap as well as a hood. So you got to break the snap and then roll the hood and pull the device out. And even pulling the device out, if you pull the device out at a weird angle, it can get hung up inside the holster. It's very similar training because this looks like a gun. It's very similar to our guns. Our guns have retention holsters. And if you break all the retention methods but still pull it out on a weird angle, it can get stuck. And you can see officers kind of doing that jerky motion.
And is the model on that 2015, was that the Taser X2 model?
Yes.
And the device, the Taser 7, did that have a holster of its own?
Yes, it has, because the device is obviously molded different, and these holsters are molded to fit the tight around the weapon, so it's a different holster for the Taser 7.
Okay. Could you just play the probe deployment here if it hasn't already gone? Stop. How far was the device from that dummy when Officer Schurr deployed the probes?
I would estimate about 6 inches, maybe 8 inches, right around there.
Was Officer Schurr trained that that's an appropriate distance to use that device?
Yes.
Because we're talking somehow, this trial's turned a lot into different policies. Okay, there's a lot of different policies and theories around the country. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
And the acronyms go on forever, right? As far as all these different bodies throughout the country on police practices.
Yes.
And Police Magazine and all sorts of other literature out there on police practices.
That is correct.
Now, to this officer right here, is he trained on every different policy in every magazine around the country?
No, he is trained to our Grand Rapids standards.
So if some magazine or some other entity around the country, some other department in New Mexico or South Carolina says, you shouldn't do this, is he expected to know that?
He is not.
Is he expected to know what he's trained?
He's expected to perform to our training standards that we give him.
In your policies?
In our policies.
In your common practices?
Yes.
Not every common practice is written in all these policies. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
So even if there's not policy on certain, whether you can or cannot do this, there's just a lot of generally accepted practices within your department.
Yeah.
And can some of those generally accepted practices on the mind of Officer Schurr differ from all these other bodies out there?
Correct.
Now, just concluding somewhat here, okay, on the Taser topics. But Taser Axon warns, I think you've already acknowledged, the taser is a serious weapon, should be treated as such at all times.
At all times, yes.
And can that be even after both cartridges are deployed?
Yes.
Because I believe, as Mr. Childs discussed as well, does the device have the ability to re-energize?
Yes.
Does it still have the drive stun function?
Yes.
Can the person still experience NMI?
Yes.
Now, there's been some discussion as far, is weapon retention a common topic?
Yes.
But Officer Schurr is also trained, is it true that Officer Schurr is also trained that he can use a device like the taser within arm's length of an individual?
Yes. And to clarify that video, the reason we're looking and designed that video that way, or that training scenario, is if you are up close to that individual that you have to use a taser on, we know it's going to be a close probe deployment, so it's not going to get that NMI. So then he moves to a different part of the body to get a bigger circuit, because it's smart enough to know that these two probes happen to be 1 inch or 2 inches apart, but then there's another spot on the body. It creates a bigger circuit, getting the large muscle groups and potentially creating NMI.
And is that something that officers are able to achieve out in the field?
Yes.
As far as close probe, follow up with the drive stun, that's something that officers do out in the field.
Correct.
Are you aware of whether prior to April 4 of 2022, whether this officer was successful in a similar close probe with follow-up?
I am not aware of that, but I know it happens.
Okay. We'll get that with a different witness perhaps, so thank you. Now I want to get to the topic of April 4 and the encounter here. Now, have you had the opportunity to review the videos from this case?
Yes, I have.
How many times approximately?
A few dozen.
Do you feel comfortable, familiar enough with the content of those videos to answer some questions? And I don't even think I necessarily need to pull up the video at this point, but do you feel confident enough, have enough knowledge to answer some questions on that?
I do.
When you go back to do an evaluation of an officer, their decision to use force or handle a certain situation, what is how do you gauge that? How do you judge assessing an officer's actions?
Obviously, we need to review all the videos that are attached to that incident. We got to review the police reports, the use of force reports, going along with that information. And we have to view it in real time, at that time, not information. I know you've heard this before. Not hindsight, as I sit in my office on a Monday morning looking at what happened over the weekend. I have to put myself in that lens of what's going on at that moment. What information do I know that they know at that time? The totality of the circumstances of what's going on, the individuals. I believe you were presented earlier a whole list of totality of circumstances, that could have a benefit or could have an explanation of why they went this way and why they went that way. Anywhere from the size difference of the officer to the person, the weather, the type of resistance, all of those things all combined. And then we do a review of, was it within policy, was it within following training at that time?
Does the officer always have to use the best tactic or make the best decision in that moment to still be deemed reasonable?
No.
Does it depend on the circumstances? Is that what you're explaining?
Yeah, it is a very dynamic, evolving event. So there's a lot of things that go into that factor. We have to weigh that stuff in judging the reasonableness of that action.
Now, since we've been focused for the most part on Taser, I just want to ask you about the Taser usage in this incident on April 4th with Officer Schurr. Was it reasonable for Officer Schurr to move on to a Taser device in the situation he was in?
Yes, when Officer Schurr decided to pull his taser out to attempt to use it in this situation, it was reasonable. He's already tried lower levels of force that were unsuccessful. And we're training him to, again, if it doesn't work, move on to the next, try something else. Ultimately, we're trying to change behavior, get compliance. And at that time, he introduced the taser in that situation.
Anything else about Officer Schurr? At the time he pulled out his taser, just looking back and watching this, the length of the fight, does the length of the fight mean anything to you?
Yeah, it's a very big deal. I mean, we go from driving around the city in a very calm but alert manner to 0 to 100, it in seconds. So in my review of the videos, you could already tell, he was become to a higher level of alertness when the driver popped out of the car and things, he's not complying and he's trying to figure things out. And then obviously he got assaulted. They run around the car and he's trying lower levels of force. He tried to tackle him. He's trying to control him, and he's not gaining anything. It's not working. So then he introduced the taser at that time and attempts to use another level of force, use another tool on his belt to gain compliance, change behavior, and get compliance to control this situation.
In the taser, was that a reasonable device for him to turn to in that situation?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as far as watching the video, he's in close quarters with Mr. Lyoya, is that right?
That is correct.
And it appears as though he attempted a close quarter deployment, is that right?
That is correct. It appears they're still in contact. Officer Schurr has a hand out trying to still gain control of Mr. Lyoya at that time as he's using the cross draw to introduce the taser and attempt to use that so within arm's length.
As we all know, the driver grabbed onto the device, is that fair to say?
Yeah, that's clearly evident.
Now, after that point, as far as somebody attempting to take a weapon from an officer, is that a pretty serious situation in training? That's
a very dangerous situation. Why are we taking this weapon away from me? Why? What is going on at that time? It's easy. If you and I are fighting and you take my wallet, you're taking my wallet to spend my money or use my credit cards. That's an assumption, but it's not just to take it away from me. So, I mean, as an officer, you're taking away a tool, a very serious and dangerous tool, off my belt. It's a very scary situation.
So when the matter gets to a point where, does it appear at some point that the driver is able to have exclusive control of the device?
Yes.
And going back to your analysis there, in the eyes of an officer, after a couple of minute fight, would it be reasonable for an officer to fear that the individual may use the device on them?
Yes, that is reasonable.
And based on your review of the video, no hindsight, was Officer Schurr reasonable to resort to deadly force in this situation?
Yes, I believe, in my opinion, he was in fear that this device was going to be used against him. He would be incapacitated. He's already exhausted at that moment.
I guess we're going to object. He can't testify to what Officer Schurr believed. That's what we've gone over numerous times in this trial, and it's inappropriate for an expert to opine on it.
Yeah, I can back it up. A reasonable officer.
So I'll strike the answers with respect to the defendant because this witness can't possibly know what was in his head at the time. So I'll strike any evidence or any testimony with respect to what was going on in the defendant's head or mind or how he was feeling at the time.
Thank you. Sir, if I could just rephrase that. Based on your knowledge, experience, the proper rules to judge, no hindsight, would it be reasonable for an officer, when an individual has disarmed them like that, to fear that the individual may use the weapon on them?
Yes.
And is there anything noteworthy in that video that takes place just prior to Officer Schurr drawing his weapon?
At that time, the suspect in this incident had complete control of the taser and had switched it from his left hand to his right hand.
And how about the positioning of these two persons just prior to the firearm coming out?
It appeared in my review that Mr. Lyoya was getting back up and turning towards Officer Schurr at that moment.
Okay. Would an officer, with the training that Officer Schurr had, would it be reasonable for that officer to be in fear that the individual may use the device on them under the totality of the circumstances?
Yes, based on the totality of circumstances, that everything that's portrayed so far at that moment, there would be a reasonable fear of another officer at that time of great bodily harm or death.
And if an officer reasonably fears serious injury or death, does that officer, are they required to wait for the individual to actually aim the device at them?
No.
Because what happens when somebody aims a device at you?
Action's faster than reaction, so we don't have to wait for someone to hurt us to do something.
If there's reasonable fear, serious injury or death, what level of force is the officer authorized to move on to?
Deadly force.
Okay. Just one moment, please. That's all. Thank you, Your Honor.
So I go over one of the things you talked about earlier with Mr. Dodge. These questions on the defendant doesn't have to go by South Carolina policy, Florida policy. You are certified under CLIA, right?
Yes.
Once again, what is CLIA?
It is the gold standard of policing. It's to set the police standards across the nation of policies and procedures in place.
And the gold standard means that you actually have other departments from across the country come in and look at your policies.
Correct. It's quite a lengthy process. They review through all of our materials, and we obtained our accreditation, saying I think it was 2019, only like 5% of the agencies in the country were accredited, and we were one of them.
So if your policies are outside generally accepted police practices, you won't be certified by CLIA, will you?
Correct.
So
Can you say what CLIA is?
You just did. I thought he just did. I asked him that.
Well,
I don't know the exact acronym of CLIA.
what are the letters?
You don't know exactly what CLEA?
I wouldn't want to guess right now. I understand what it is.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to listen, but I thought I could. Commission on Law Enforcement Standards. But whatever. The point is, CLIA is the gold standard. Grand Rapids Police has policies that are generally accepted by the police practices because you got CLIA certification.
Correct.
So we're not asking them to do by Florida policy. It's under generally accepted police practices, which your policies reflect.
Our policies have been reviewed and to give us that accreditation, but we hold Officer Schurr to our standards.
Just going into it, the Taser we've talked about, the Taser is considered an intermediate weapon under Grand Rapids Police policy, right?
Correct?
And it's a less than lethal use of force.
Yes.
And even, talked a little bit, switch off over to my PowerPoint, my computer, please. This is Exhibit 24. You've had an opportunity, were you in here for the child's presentation?
Yes, I was.
And you recognize this slide?
I do.
This is the slide for the Taser 7. Presentation that you give is an instructor.
Yeah, I would have to see the version number, but yes, it is.
Okay. But this is one of the slides that's on there. You recognize that?
I do.
Now, studies show that CW's effects are comparable to less than fighting or fleeing. And that's you tell these officers that.
The exertion of the device is like you're fighting or fleeing. Yes, that's what it causes after you experience NMI.
Now we've talked a lot about, go back to, they're not risk-free though, right?
Correct.
Now one of the things you do talk about, sorry. This is one of the slides still. This is kind of the main warning slide, if you will, right?
Yes.
Now, they just don't give you the slides and tell you to talk about them. They give you kind of a script, a thing to tell the officers, right?
Yeah, there's notes attached.
One of the notes, and particularly this side, on this slide, is the National Institute of Justice, and the 5-year study found that Taser energy weapon deployment has a margin of safety or error greater than most alternatives. That's one of the things you tell them, right?
We just, not that specific.
What do you mean, not, you don't follow, you don't, so they give you the stuff and you don't follow, you don't say it?
We read the slide and go through it, and we don't go into the minutia of who did the study on that.
But you don't, but you say the basic part of it is that the significantly lower risk of injury than physical force.
Yes.
So you tell the part about agencies who use Taser decrease suspect injuries requiring medical attention by 45%, and officer injury requiring medical attention by 80%. You say that?
Yeah, we go over the reasons. The Taser was designed to reduce a lot of things. You know, baton strikes for one. They're ugly. They're nasty. It looks horrible to hit someone with a metal rod. This reduces the injuries because it's designed to not go hands-on if you don't have to, if it's safe to do so. And then it's designed to reduce the injuries to the officers as well as the suspect.
Okay. And part of the, it's not go hands-on, so you have that distance. Part of it is distance, is having the ability to use distance between you and the subject you're trying to apprehend, correct?
Yeah, it's designed that way, correct.
Go to Exhibit 32 now, Your Honor. I'm trying to make that a little bit bigger. Once again, we've got over use of force policy. This is 9.9-1.3. This is the use of force that's kind of in place for Grand Rapids Police use of force policies, right?
Yes.
And you recognize this subject, potential subject actions or level of resistance.
Correct.
You testified before, you testified back in April, or back in 2022, whatever the first prelim that you talked about.
Yes, sir.
You testified that Patrick was demonstrating active aggression, correct?
I believe so. I would need my transcript to confirm. But
Would that help you? You want to refresh your recollection? Or you want to take a look at that?
yeah, please.
Referring to the preliminary exam transcript, page 33, to be day 2. Just starting on line 24, kind of going over into page 34.
Yeah. It was contextually, I don't think we were talking about this case. We were just talking about use of force.
So active aggression, that's what Patrick was doing. Active aggression in this situation. Your answer, correct.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that bottom line. But yes, correct.
Okay. So Patrick was engaged in active aggression. There's a distinction there between active aggression and deadly force assault, correct?
There is.
Just because somebody's in active aggression doesn't mean an officer can use deadly force, right?
In that context, correct.
We mean in that context. What do you mean by that?
It's not a black and white answer in questions. And so, strictly the way you worded it, yes.
Well, you can't use deadly force for somebody challenging an officer, right?
Right.
You can't use deadly force for somebody punching an officer.
Correct.
You can't use that deadly force for somebody kicking an officer.
Again, contextually, how many times have they kicked me? How many times have they punched me? Am I about to lose consciousness?
All right. All right, and that's fair. But it's a continuum. So
Correct.
it's under if a 10-year-old's reportedly kicking you, you're not going to be able to use deadly force, right?
No, sir.
But if it's a middle linebacker with the Detroit Lions and they're pummeling you till you're about to pass out, that's a whole different thing.
Correct.
So the whole idea is the reasonableness, like we talked about on the continuum.
Yes, sir.
So how reasonable was it given all the facts and circumstances?
Yes.
Now, once again, going to this Taser thing we talked about, all of a sudden we're getting this The taser's taken away, that's deadly force. That justifies deadly force. Where is the policy for that? Where is that?
Again, you're looking for the black and white answer. It's the gray area. It's the totality of the circumstances at that time. So part of the reason we do voluntary exposures is to know how this device affects you. And so the level of pain, the level of exhaustion. Add that to the totality of circumstances of extreme exhaustion after a 2.5 minute fight. And it's not written down. It's the totality, and that's what we're going
And
over.
that's what I'm going for. So it's not, there is no, hey, taser's gone, you get to shoot him, right?
Right.
It's based on, you gotta take a look at all the context, looking at the whole situation, right?
Correct.
And then you make that judgment call, not on the basis of hindsight, but what would a reasonable officer know at that point in time?
At that time.
Now, one of the things, the question came up earlier, I mean, you were part of the training unit, correct?
Yes, sir.
And were you in charge of the training unit at the time this all happened?
No, I was a
You just
captain at
left?
that point. Yeah.
You just kind of left, it was
Correct.
transition. One of the things that was talked about, you do scenario training.
Yes, we do.
And some of that scenario training goes for a long time, right?
Yeah.
It's not for just a couple minutes, you go for longer than that, right? Depending on the facts and circumstances.
In the training environment?
Correct.
Yeah, we try to experience, in the police academy when I went through, they had us go into a boxing ring and do a full round of boxing to see how tired and exhausted you are fighting another individual, to show that we are not trained professionals that can go 10 rounds.
Sure. But that's part of the training because you don't know what's going to happen out there on the street.
Correct.
Things don't happen in 10 seconds, 20 seconds. You may be struggling for a long time.
Yeah, there's potential for that.
There's
Yes, it's a
potential.
very risky job.
Do you remember your testimony back in there? You said sometimes some of them are long, drawn-out physical altercations on a wrestling mat.
Yeah, we do that during the orientation to show them, what their capabilities are at that time, and to show them, if someone is a more advanced fighter and wrestler or whatever, they could disarm you of all your stuff during this long, drawn-out event, in a safe, secure training environment.
And one of the things you talked about is going through this training is you have to have the ability to maybe transition, if you will, from different tactics.
Yes.
Right? So in this one, what we saw, the transition, we saw a knee kick,
Yeah, a knee strike.
knee strikes, we saw a few of them, right?
Correct.
We saw a taser,
Correct.
and we saw a gun.
We also saw a tackle. We saw...
Is a tackle a trained thing?
It's an untrained thing, but it happens. Very common in police practices.
Sure.
We also saw, he attempted arm bar controls of trying to grab his wrists and pulling them back, trying to get him into an advantageous position early on, to get your arms behind your back, like we would handcuff somebody. And so, yeah, we had, soft, empty hand techniques of, grabbing the arms and the wrists and trying to pull them behind the back, the tackle, a strike, a few knee strikes, and then the taser.
Okay. That's all you saw in this incident?
Yeah.
And then for your arm.
Just as far as this topic of try different things. Chris, Officer Schurr here tried several different means of what level would his force have been in that situation? As far as the knee strikes, and what are those referred to on the level of force?
Those are hard, empty hand techniques. A kick and a strike is where we would put that at that level.
And he tried several of those?
He did.
And at times, perhaps, let's say an individual's extremely intoxicated. Okay, can those be ineffective?
Yes.
And if you add exhaustion into the equation, would that affect the officer's ability to continue to try the same level of strikes?
Correct. Yeah, exhaustion would be less effective because now, the human performance, you don't have as much power 1 minute into a fight than you did the first minute of the fight. You're getting tired. Your muscles are losing their strength.
And just in general, to some of these strike tactics, can they be ineffective on certain people, such as intoxicated persons?
Yes.
And can that include even the asp or the baton?
Yeah, it can include anything, yes.
Because what is the asp or the baton? Is that striking the individual?
That would be, yeah, striking the individual with the baton.
So if other strike mechanisms were ineffective on an individual, would the officer need to keep going through all of those same types of force to try everything possible?
No. Long ago, they used to have a 1+1. They do this, we can go to this, one to this. And then it's been decided through the courts, that's not necessary. You have to know what this level of force, in that officer's belief, would not be effective at that time.
Okay. And really, but you don't necessarily have an immediate escalation. If you try this, go to that, you can always stay one ahead of the next, the step prior, right? Or the resistance or the aggression of the individual.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is to gain compliance and to try to get that done as quickly as possible so you don't have to be exhausted, but it wasn't working.
Okay. But if an officer's tried a level of force, strikes, lower physical controls, and they're not effective, is the officer trained that they can then move on up to a next level of force?
Yes.
And if that level of force is ineffective, can they continue to go up the spectrum there?
Yes.
They don't have to try every other possible means below to
No, they do
move
not.
on up. Talk some about these this disarming of a taser. If an individual disarms an officer of their weapon, can it be deadly force?
Yes.
Under the totality of the circumstances, correct?
Correct.
There was some mention of active aggression. You don't necessarily use deadly force against active aggression, correct? It doesn't have to be your first resort.
That is correct.
Can it escalate to deadly force pretty quickly?
Yes, it could.
So, for instance, here, if the driver started out with those functions, but once a weapon gets thrown into the mix, can that change the equation pretty quickly?
Yes, it could.
Just one moment, please, Your Honor. That's all. Thank you.
Just a follow-up, going to this, somebody disarms you with a taser, so if I grab your taser and I stand there, can you shoot me?
I don't have to wait for you to tase me.
Sure, I'm not saying that, but can you shoot me? I grab it, I stand here.
Again, contextual. It has to be the totality of the circumstances. But could it be reasonable that I fear that you're going to use it against me? Yes.
Okay, if I turn, I'm away from you, can you tase me?
Tase you?
Or shoot me, excuse me.
Again, action's faster than reaction. You have to base it on the whole entire situation. We can't just have a black and white answer here.
So the fact that you took the taser doesn't allow you to shoot him. It's not based on the totality of the circumstances, right?
Say that one more time.
The fact that somebody takes a taser doesn't mean you can shoot him. It depends on all the facts and circumstances. You got to take a look at the whole incident.
Correct. You have to take a look at the whole incident.
And I guess going to that, since you're the taser expert, has a Grand Rapids police officer ever been disarmed with a taser and shot?
A Grand Rapids police officer? No. They've been disarmed of tasers.
They've been disarmed with tasers, but disarmed and shot.
No.
How many times have they actually been disarmed with tasers?
I can remember a couple times, but there were multiple officers there at that time.
And nothing happened.
Yeah, due to the fact there were multiple officers there.
You said tase and then shot. You mean taser, right?
In terms of
Disarmed with the taser and shot, that was the question that you asked.
correct.
He answered, but I'm just asking, when you say shot, you mean with the taser?
Shot with a gun or shot with a taser, either.
Yeah, the answer is still no.
Thank you.
Just in follow-up, was this gentleman right here trained that the taser is a serious weapon capable of causing serious injury or death?
Yes,
And to have some fear for the device?
yes.
And the prosecutor brought up if somebody disarms it, and you said those other occasions there were other officers around?
Correct.
And is it different when the officer's on their own?
Yeah, it changes the totality of the circumstances and
But
the
the-
reasonable fear.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. But the officer has, they're trained that they can use that taser when they're by themselves?
Yes.
Okay. That's all, thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And I did see a couple of hands raised on the jury, so Michael will come and direct those questions. If you could approach Mr. Dodge and Mr. Beckman, please. First, would there be more energy, less energy, or the same omitted if you touched energized wires from the taser compared to having the prongs in you?
It would depend. If the insulated wire was intact, it would be pretty self-correcting, like touching a electrical fence on a farm. But if there was any break in that insulation, that would potentially create that full circuit of energy going into your body. It would, like he said, like Mr. Child said, the energy jumps through the air. It could jump through that and into the skin at that time.
And can you reload the wires, or do you have to use new cartridges on Exhibit 23?
No, we would get a new cartridge put in place. So every device is going out on the street has a brand new cartridge inside of it.
So you can't reload the
You
wires?
cannot reload them, no.
And are officers required to take implicit bias classes or some type of mental health or psychology class, or classes in cultural competency?
When you mean class, we have instruction on those topics, yes.
I guess would be trainings. Like
Correct.
Are they trained in implicit bias? So I guess I'll break it up. Are they trained in implicit bias?
Yes.
Do they also receive training regarding mental health or psychology?
Mental health, yes.
And do they receive training in cultural competency?
Yes.
And Mr. Dodge, any follow-up from either or any of those questions?
No, thank you.
Mr. Becker?
Just in terms of you watched the incident, did you see any indication anybody was suffering from NMI or there's any reaction from the wires?
No.
Thank you.
And then you see another question from the jury, so we'll retrieve that. If you can approach. Does there have to be another point of contact, or can the wire alone deliver the effect?
No, if you were just touching one wire and the electricity is going through it, it'd be self-correcting, but it wouldn't create NMI. You need that, close the circuit with that second point of contact. You either stepping on the probe or have the drives done going off. You need that second point of contact, if that answers the question.
Can you follow through that, Mr. Dodge?
So one wire, let's say it's perhaps exposed wire, but if you're in contact with 2 points of exposed wire, could that create a second point?
Yes, the electricity is flowing from the device to its endpoint, to it's either the probe or if the wire is snapped in half to the end of the wire. And if you were touching that and a probe or that and the end of the device, it could create NMI.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
I don't see any other hands raised on the jury. May this witness be excused, Mr. Dodge?
Yes.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much. You're excused.
Thank you. Does Taser, you want back?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Defense will call the next witness.
Jason Gady, G-A-D-Y.
Good morning. And sir, before you take your seat, if you can please raise your right hand. My clerk will swear you in.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
And remember, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you. Sir, can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Jason Gady, last name Gady.
Sir, how are you employed?
Grand Rapids Police Department.
And how long have you been employed with Grand Rapids Police Department?
Since September of 2000, so 24, almost 5 years. Yeah.
Just going back a moment, prior to joining the department, did you attend college?
Yes.
And what degree did you attain?
From Grand Valley State University, a Bachelor's of Science in Criminal Justice.
Did you ultimately attend a police academy?
Yes, in Grand Valley State University Police Academy.
Now, going to your career here with GRPD, can you take us through some of the different positions that you've had?
I worked a number of years night shift road patrol, and then I worked in the training unit first time as a use of force instructor and also as a departmental recruiter. And I went back and worked in a community officer capacity, and then most recently went back to the training unit to work full-time as a use of force instructor with the primary focus of coordinating the firearms training program.
And it's been a while since I looked at your resume, but do you train only within Grand Rapids Police Department? Or do you train other departments as well?
No, I'm solely a Grand Rapids Police Department instructor.
That's what I thought. All right. And as a trainer in firearms and use of force, are you well versed in GRPD policies?
Yes.
On firearms in particular?
Yes.
And your full-time duties currently are firearms training at GRPD? Is that
Yes.
right? All right, I would move to have Officer Gady admitted as an expert in the field of Grand Rapids Police Department firearms training, policies, and practices.
Any objection?
No objection.
I think he will be considered an expert in that field.
We've had some witnesses go over a considerable amount of time and evidence about other training policies and all those topics, but I'd just like to focus on firearms with you if I could, and some of the training that Grand Rapids Police Department officers have on firearms. Can you give just a general overview of approximately how much firearm training an officer obtains going back to that 8-week in-house?
For the 8-week in-house, it's pretty substantial. It's anywhere from 60 to 70 hours of live fire and firearms training, and that's not taking into account all the scenario-based training that incorporate deadly force decision-making with simunitions. On top of that, annual trainings and qualifications, anywhere from 4 to 6 times a year, several hours. So.
And I'm sure you could spend hours explaining every aspect of the training, but just in general, is the firearm training, is it purely shooting stationary targets, or does it also involve simulations and whatnot?
No, there's quite a bit of decision-making training built into either the live fire component and also scenario-based training.
Because reality out in the field, you're not. It's not always as simple as a stationary situations.
No.
Is that fair to say?
That's correct.
Are GRPD personnel trained to use various firearms?
Yes, we have different firearms platforms that we have to train and certify on every year.
Now, I'd like to move forward now to April 4, 2022, while Christopher Schurr was on patrol in the city. Did he carry a pistol?
Yes.
And as an officer within GRPD, are they required to train with the gun that they carry on the job?
Yes.
And an officer such as Officer Schurr here on road patrol, are they required to carry that gun on their person during their shift?
Yes.
Why is that?
In the event that they have to utilize that.
And where on their person, very law enforcement term, but where on their person is the officer required to carry the firearm?
Particularly for road patrol assignment, on their dominant side or their strong side hip on their assigned duty belt.
As they carry that pistol, does the pistol need to be loaded with ammunition?
Yes.
Why?
So in the event that an immediate response to a deadly force threat is addressed, it's ready to be utilized without any hesitation.
And are police trained that they may need to draw and fire that gun as fast as possible?
With
Sorry
accurate.
to interrupt, but can you speak loud?
I'm sorry. Yes, Your Honor. Absolutely. With an accuracy component, yes.
Can threats come quickly at an officer?
Absolutely.
Can it go from perhaps a no force, low level of force situation to deadly force pretty quickly?
Yes.
Now, I'd like to ask you just a little bit, not about firearm deployment or use, but just weapon drawing, a firearm drawing. When out in the field, and I'm not talking about training at the range, but when actually out on patrol, when are GRPD personnel trained that they should unholster and draw their pistol?
They can unholster and draw their pistol when there's a fear for safety.
Okay. And later on, does the officer then need to be able to articulate why they felt it was necessary to draw the pistol?
A lot of times it's articulated in their incident report. There is one. There's not a mandated reporting requirement, but a lot of times it does go into the incident report, yes.
And now, so it doesn't necessarily need to be a deadly force situation, just to simply draw the weapon.
Correct.
And is it fairly common that GRPD officers draw their firearms for various reasons?
Yes.
Okay. Now, moving on to firearm deployment, actually firing the gun, that's different than merely drawing the gun as far
Yes,
as the
correct.
standards. And under policies in place back April 2022, when was an officer trained to deploy their firearm?
In response to a deadly force threat? Is that what you're?
Yes.
Yes, when there is a reasonable threat of death or serious bodily injury to the officer or another person.
And firing their gun upon someone, what level of force would that be under policy?
Deadly force.
According to the use of force training and policies, if the officer believes deadly force is necessary, what is their objective when they deploy that firearm?
To stop these subjects' actions as quickly as possible.
Now, if it's deemed a deadly force situation, is a firearm the only way that they resort to deadly force, or can they basically use other means of force too to have deadly force?
They could use other means that would reasonably result in death or serious bodily injury to the suspect to meet that deadly force threat.
But if it's an imminent threat and the officer has a pistol, they're justified to use their pistol? Is
Yes.
that correct? I'm sorry, sir. It's been a full morning.
That's all
I'm
right.
trying not to ask you the same questions that we've already went over with some folks. Now, when it comes to this decision to use deadly force, use your firearm, does GRPD have policies that may lay out, some of the circumstances that may be reasonable for an officer to move up to a different level of force?
Yes, it's based on reasonableness, it's based on what we say totality of the circumstances, all the circumstances present at the time the officer had to make that decision.
And is one of the circumstances that's often talked about in firearms training in particular, reaction times?
Reaction time is something that we recognize in training, make the officers aware of, and also we try to minimize.
Now, we've already heard this topic brought up several times, but are officers warned and trained that they may be killed or injured when they don't react or act soon enough to a threat?
Yes, that's a possibility.
And in regards to firearm use of deadly force, I want to move on to the topic of targets, okay? And we're already moving along here, not too much to go. But if an officer decides to use their firearm against a deadly force threat, where are they trained that they may need to target?
Available target areas with the intent of stopping the suspect's actions as quickly as possible.
And not very pleasant topics, okay, to talk about, but you're a firearms trainer. Are headshots acceptable?
Yes.
And is that actually a target that's trained upon at times?
Yes.
Is an officer trained, if the officer perceives they might be in a deadly force situation, are they trained that they should fire warning shots?
No.
To see if perhaps that may help their situation?
Absolutely not.
Is that allowed? If you can just elaborate, is that allowed? at all?
No, it is not allowed or advocated.
If an officer may be in fear of serious bodily harm or injury, are they trained that they should perhaps try shooting to extremities or other parts of the body to see if perhaps that may alleviate the situation?
No. No.
Are they actually advised not to do that?
Yes, for several reasons.
But what's one of the main reasons? If you have
again,
an imminent threat and you
trying to, again, stop the subject's actions as quickly as possible.
With recruits and officers, is it a common topic that's discussed as far as even after an individual say if they're wounded, that the threat can still be there.
Absolutely, yes.
Just going back to some general firearms, you mentioned the officer must carry their firearm with them at all times on road patrol, is that right?
Correct.
Now, moving on to the case here, you're obviously familiar with the case that we're all here on today.
Yes.
And have you had the opportunity to review the body cam, the in-dash cam, and the cell phone video from this matter?
I have.
Several times?
Yes.
Is that fair to say? Just want to talk about proximity. Does GRPD train officers on firearm use that they may need to use their firearm in close proximity to the subject?
We do, yes.
What is that sometimes referred to as?
Close quarters engagements, close quarters manipulation.
Now, if an officer, going to firearms training, okay, if an officer is in a physical struggle with a subject who's a deadly force threat, what sometimes is trained to the officer on simply backing away or disengaging from the subject?
There is times that we do train inside those close proximities to have to deploy your firearm because, first of all, they may be in a position with the subject, either they're on the ground, pinned, tangled up in a manner that the officer cannot engage physically. But if a deadly force threat presents itself, they still have to be able to meet that potentially with a handgun and be able to draw it, manipulate it, keep it in battery, and effectively utilize it, right? Another reason may be simply due to entanglement with a subject, due to physical exhaustion or physical limitations. The officer may not simply be able to quickly and effectively get up and disengage, right? So in that scenario, again, a deadly force threat presents itself. They may have to utilize, again, their handgun inside that close proximity. So those would be two big reasons why we train inside those close distances.
Okay. Just going to the case here, we've already exhausted several of these topics, but as you review the case here, if an officer in Officer Schurr's position is in reasonable fear of serious injury or death, was there anything inappropriate about or unreasonable about the way that Officer Schurr drew and fired his pistol?
No.
If I could just have one moment here. Just in follow-up to that last point, okay?
Yes.
Obviously, one aspect of this case is the fact that a bullet hit Mr. Lyoya in the back of the head. Is there anything about the fact that it was a headshot like this that's unreasonable in a deadly force situation?
Unreasonable? No.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
It's Officer Decker, right?
Yes, sir.
Why did you refuse to meet with Detective Sergeant Tubergen about your testimony?
At this point, due to proximity to the case, I just didn't feel it was necessary.
He was going to ask you about what your testimony was, right? You knew that it was about the case, so we wanted to know what you're going to testify to, right?
Yes, sir.
And you just, on yourself, decided it's not necessary.
Correct.
Why? How could it not be necessary? Isn't it important to have, give information so people can know what you're going to say and be able to share in open court?
I guess I didn't know the full context of the meeting, or...
You don't know the full context. You didn't reach out to him. You had to go through your sergeant, or your captain, right?
That's who contacted me, yes.
So
I guess I would object to relevance here.
I think it goes to bias, Your Honor. Why would we refuse to meet with an officer on the opposing side?
Under no obligation
Relevance.
Right, so relevance as to why he wouldn't, like, Mr. Becker.
I think it goes to bias, Your Honor.
Or credibility, I'll allow it. I'll overrule that objection.
So what, is it common practice for you just to not take it upon yourself not to meet with opposing counsel when you're called in other cases?
I haven't been contacted like that in any cases prior in any of my experience.
So the one time you are, you just say, you blow it off and say, I'm not going to do it.
Blow off was probably not the right term, but
Oops. Fix that. For the record, reflecting showing opposing counsel, we marked to Exhibit 37. No.
Sorry, Your Honor, I'm just not familiar with this. I'm just taking a quick look here.
No. Let the record reflect that I'm showing the witness will be marked as People's Exhibit 37 for identification purposes. Sure, you recognize that?
yes, sir.
What is it?
It appears to be a training outline from the recruit class that Officer Schurr was part of.
And the recruit class, can you tell how you tell that? What are you referring to?
I see RC-1501 at the top.
And your name's on that?
Yes,
What does that indicate to you?
that I was part of the training that day.
Let the record, could I move for admission of Appeals Exhibit 37, Your Honor?
No objection.
So now, in terms of that, part of that was guns and vehicles, right?
Yes,
And that was the gist of this training, is how to deal with guns being in vehicles.
that's what it indicates.
And is this the only time you would have trained a defendant?
The only time I would have trained,
Yeah, I mean,
Officer
there's one,
Schurr.
we got one record of training. Have you trained him in other situations?
I would have helped out through different trainings throughout that recruit class orientation.
So are you assigned as part of the recruit class, and is that, or, let me figure out, are you as a training officer, do different training officers get assigned to a specific class, and then you're not a part of a class, or is it all the time you're
There's
training?
quite a few of us, so we will plug in with certain components, trainings of that class throughout the 8 weeks.
So you plugged in for the firearms training regarding that class.
Some of the firearms training, yes.
Did you work with us, the defendant?
Yes.
After
Yes.
like, how so?
Through mandatory trainings, annual qualifications, those assigned trainings throughout the years that Officer Schurr was employed with us.
So how many times since 2015 have you been involved in some sort of training with him?
With Officer Schurr?
Correct.
I can't throw a number on it, but there would have been a good handful. Yeah.
Good handful, is that 10, is that?
Without going back on all the detailed training records, because we have hundreds of trainings throughout the year that we put, all of our sworn officers through several times a year, so.
And you worked with him then on just a day-to-day basis too?
Had I worked with him, I didn't never work the road patrol assignment with him.
So just purely training?
Purely training.
Thank you, I'm done.
Sir, this case is from April of 2022, is that correct?
Yes.
You've been with the Firearms Training Department since then, for the most part?
Yes, I've been a firearms instructor since then.
Over the 3 years or so, did anybody from the prosecutor's office or the detective
Here ever reach out to you or anyone else from the training department to perhaps ask for some more explanation, clarification, or any questions about this
You're not
case?
going to object. The training department, we did work with the training department, so it's kind of a broad question.
I mean, I guess you could be more, I mean, if you're saying it's a broad question, you can just be
I
more
am.
specific.
Did anybody reach out to you or any of your close firearm instructors for any questions on this prior to a couple weeks ago?
I can speak for myself. and the answer
That's
is
fine. That's better to do. I'm sorry.
No.
No. Okay. And you were recently reached out to, and did the defense advise you not to get back to the prosecutor or anything like that?
Nobody advised me not to. No.
Okay. Now, that sheet there, guns and vehicles,
Yes.
and I'm not sure, so maybe the point, you've known Officer Schurr on and off over the years?
I have, yes.
Is there anything about the testimony that you provided about basic firearm training and basic firearm use that was biased for Officer Schurr?
Not at all.
Okay, thank you.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
I do see at least one question on the jury. My clerk can drive that for me. Another question is if you can clarify, when shooting or using deadly force, the target should be to stop the area of threat and to stop the subject's actions, but it's not okay to aim or target hands or arms if that is the area of threat.
Yes. So to clarify, it's not advisable, first of all, when an officer has to deploy deadly force on a suspect, particularly using a firearm, accuracy is of great concern, okay? So that's the other thing too. Accuracy diminishes the smaller the target area. And also, it doesn't make it any less potentially lethal. Deadly force, anything that an officer is going to deliver that would reasonably result in death or serious bodily injury to the suspect is, we don't differentiate between where it is. However, if we need to very immediately and quickly stop the subject's actions, again, hitting in an extremity may not accomplish that. If that clarifies it all, yeah.
Justified, I think you explained it well, officer, but let's just say you have a stationary target, okay, like a human body target. If the target were to have a pistol in the hand, raised, and you're teaching the officer where to aim, would you aim to shoot the hand or the weapon?
No, absolutely not. Again, one big reason would be the accuracy component. The likelihood of a miss would be much higher than a larger target area. So,
And where are you justified to generally aim?
Generally aim, center mass, head, any of those vital areas that, again, are going to have a much greater effect on quickly stopping that, the subject's actions.
And in reality, are those areas that are likely to end
Yes.
in death?
Yes, more likely.
Okay. It's deadly force, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further, Your Honor?
I don't see any other hands raised. May this witness be excused, Mr. Dodge?
Yes, thank you.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Excused. We're right up on the lunch hour, so what we'll do is break for lunch until 1 o'clock. And so, once again, our sounds are open record, but please leave your notes upside down in your chair to remember you're not to discuss the case with each other or with anyone else. And also continue avoiding any news reports in the media and in social media. And we'll see you back at 1 o'clock. All right, to the jury, please. Thank you, you may be seated. I did want to place a couple of questions on the record that were asked or that were given by the jury but not asked of the witness. I would like to place them on the record. The first is, do we know if Mr. Lyoya was left-handed or right-handed? And so because that particular witness wouldn't have had knowledge about that question was not asked. And the next was, can a series of least optimal, though possibly reasonable choices ultimately result in choices that are unreasonable given, I can't read that word, given some kind of events or an unreasonable situation in relation to your review of this or any case? First, that's a pretty overly broad question. Second, it's up to the jury to decide what's reasonable, what's not reasonable. And obviously, any review of a different case wouldn't be relevant to this case. I don't know if there's any other objectionable language within the question that you would like me to place on the record, Mr. Dodge. Mr. Becker, you want?
No, Your Honor, we did not feel, based on Captain Kersey, that was a relevant question for him.
Agreed, Your Honor.
And then just to place on the record, because there were 2 questions passed up this last time, but one just says, it's a question to me about some court procedures and language that's used. And so I intend to respond. One is asking how come some people ask to approach and some don't. And then another is remind what sustained, overrule, and other terms that I say mean. I intend to just write a note back saying, as far as how come some ask to approach and some don't, you should not be concerned or focusing on this exclamation point, because I don't want them focusing on, wait a minute, why didn't they? That's my response to that question. And then sustain, I was just gonna write court agrees, overrule means the court disagrees. And then I don't know what other terms they're referring to. Is that an okay way? I don't want to not respond to the question because it was asked, and I also don't want to respond in a way that's not okay with both sides. Mr. Becker?
I have no problem with that, Your Honor. That's fine.
Okay. I'll just pass this note back. Okay. And is there anything else we need to address before we break for the lunch hour, Mr. Cordova?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Mr. Becker?
Nothing more, Your Honor.
Okay. So we'll be in recess for lunch until 1 o'clock.
And we'll